Olivia, my sister, mentioned they're coming over tomorrow afternoon. I'm sorry for always causing you trouble. Oh really? No problem. Should I prepare some snacks for tomorrow morning? I apologize that this keeps happening. It's like they don't have any boundaries. It's fine. I recently heard about a cute pastry place from a colleague. I'll go there to buy something. Aaron, my husband, is a 35-year-old office worker, 3 years older than me. We met at the office and got married later. He's always confident and a truly wonderful husband. He's such a nice guy and he is popular with the ladies. He is 178 centimeters tall and looks slim with a well-proportioned face. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say 100 out of 100 people would find him handsome. If he's good-looking and considerate, it's not surprising he is popular. However, it may be surprising that such a man married a tomboyish woman like me. Whatever age looks, especially his sisters, seem to feel strongly about this. Aaron, look, I got the recipe from my shop and made this myself. Wow, you cooked this. That's a surprise. You've never cooked before. Great job. Isn't this cool? I will enjoy it with Olivia later. Aaron, guess what? I've been getting a lot of praise at my new job. They say I'm good at what I do. Amelia, it sounds like things are going well for you. It's great that you're being recognized. You're doing an excellent job. The two sisters-in-law, Emma and Amelia, truly adore their brother, my husband. Even when they visit our house, they don't show much interest in me. It's tough with both of them always clinging to him and calling him Aaron. However, their deep trust and pride in him show how reliable he is. I found it in dealing with Olivia. Your bangs look weird. They're split in the middle. You should fix it. Really? Is it that noticeable? As the wife of my brother, you should look presentable. Wow, you're always so strict with looks. Afterwards, Emma kept pointing out how unsuitable. I stand by my husband, refusing to succumb to the sisters' attempts to force agreement. Despite their insistence, my kind and wonderful husband never once aligns with them. You two don't truly understand Olivia's good side, he always asserts with absolute conviction. Suddenly, Emma and Amelia, looking displeased, retreat home. I'm sorry for always putting you through this, Olivia. It's because I've spoiled them. My husband apologizes, as he often does. They always end up being rude to you. After her sisters depart, my husband offers his comforting presence, a consistent source of solace. That's the kind of husband he is, which is why he's so attractive, I muse inwardly. Furthermore, he excels in his career, showcasing remarkable talent week after week. The following week, we embark on a visit to his parents' house to celebrate my mother-in-law's birthday. A mere 15-minute drive separates our home from hers, with an MTA station and the city's main shopping area in between. For her birthday gift, we opt for a beautiful sweater. My active mother-in-law frequents the gym, enjoys dining out, and relishes travels with friends. During our shopping trip, my husband accompanies me, admiring the chosen garment. It looks lovely, he remarks, reinforcing his support and appreciation. When we gave her the present, she was thrilled. Thank you as always, Olivia. This is so lovely. My friends are throwing me a birthday party next week, and I'm thinking of wearing it then. It's great. We always appreciate you, Olivia. My mother-in-law and father-in-law always acknowledge and respect me greatly. When I decided to marry my husband and first met them, to be honest, the atmosphere was a bit awkward. Both of my in-laws seemed to have stiff expressions and I felt a distance, which made me uneasy. I later learned that my husband had once considered marrying another woman 8 years ago and had introduced her to his parents. However, her attitude towards her potential in-laws wasn't good, and it became clear through discussions that she was only interested in my husband's looks, and eventually the marriage was cut off. Therefore, initially, my in-laws were concerned that I might be another woman who was only interested in their son's appearance. However, after a while, my in-laws seemed to be reassured that I'm not interested only in his looks. Now, we have built a very good relationship. Aaron, you're here. Emma, who had just finished her part-time job, came home. Aaron, there is something. I want to tell you, I've decided to get married. Really? Congratulations, Emma. While I was surprised to hear about Emma's decision to get married, I noticed that my in-laws looked worried. She's going to marry a man from the restaurant where she worked part-time. He is 40, 12 years older than her. I thought my in-laws were concerned about the age gap, but they were actually worried that the man seems to have no savings. Despite their warnings, Emma insisted he is wonderful and kind, perhaps even resembling her brother, and that she can persuade him to start saving money. Even though Emma feels that everything is fine, it seems that the in-laws are not so easily convinced. My husband seemed to understand the situation and said, "Is that so, Emma? Is he a good person?" He listened intently to her story about him. 2 weeks later, my sister-in-law visited our apartment again. We had dinner ready for them since they were coming in the evening. As we all enjoyed dinner together, my husband said, "This hamburger steak is one of Olivia's specialties. It's so delicious, right?" I immediately reacted with apparent annoyance. "It doesn't seem like a big job. I can cook this too. Don't act like you're a good chef, Olivia." Exactly. Making hamburger steak is too easy. Despite this, the topic turned to Emma's impending marriage. "Emma, don't you think it's a bit too soon? Haven't you only been dating for 2 months? Maybe you could take a bit more time to get to know each other better," my husband suggested. Emma, usually obedient to him, grew angry. "Mind your own business, Aaron. I've already made up my mind. He might seem unreliable, but he is a kind and good person. I love him. He may not be impressive, but he's honest and cute. I'm going to marry him." "Emma, even though he is 20 years older than you, I don't see him as the honest and cute person you are imagining. It might be better to watch and wait a bit." "Why are you intervening too? Are you mocking me? Who do you think you are?" "That's right. Emma has made up her mind. Let's go, Amelia. I've had enough." In anger, Emma left her apartment with Amelia. Several days later, "Amelia, I've come up with something interesting." "What is it?" "Remember last time when Olivia started to act like a big sister?" It seemed Emma was still angry about the advice that I've given her about her marriage. Emma's interesting idea was, one day, I stopped at an ATM on my way home from work. There was a credit card left at the ATM. The card belonged to someone named Isabella Smith, coincidentally having the same surname as me, Smith. A sticker with the PIN number was attached, making the card easily usable by anyone. As I learned to turn it into the police, I constantly ran into my sister's in-laws on my way. "Hey Olivia, are you on your way home right now?" Emma asked. "Yes, I am. It's rare to see you here," I replied. "Olivia, I'm really hungry. Can you treat us to some food?" Emma requested. I was very surprised. This was so unlikely of her. "Really? Of course I would. Let me check with Aaron. Just wait a moment." When I sent a message to Aaron, he replied saying he'd be late and told me to go ahead. "What are you in the mood to eat?" I asked. "I'd like some pasta," Emma said. "Me too. I want pasta," Amelia chimed in. Following their request, the three of us headed to a fancy Italian restaurant. Emma ordered pescatelle and Amelia ordered bolognese. I ordered carbonara. We talked about my husband while eating, enjoying hearing stories of how he protected them from bullies and helped them with their studies. Our pasta arrived, and as we were eating and chatting, suddenly Amelia exclaimed, "Oh, I'm sorry." Some of her bolognese sauce had splashed onto my white shirt, leaving a big stain. "Olivia, you might want to go to the restroom to clean that stain," Emma suggested. "You're right, I should," I agreed. Heading to the restroom, I left my seat with just my handkerchief. By the time I returned as the boss had finished their meals, quickly I ate the remaining pasta and we left the restaurant. "I'm really sorry about staining your shirt," Amelia apologized. "It's all right, it wasn't a special shirt anyway," I reassured her. "Thanks for the treat today," Emma said. "You're welcome. It was really fun hearing stories about Aaron. Let's do it again," I suggested. "Yeah, let's. See ya. Take care," they bid farewell. It was so happy to finally have a proper conversation with my sisters-in-law. However, I completely forgot about the credit card I had collected at the ATM. Turns out, Emma had gotten a hold of it. "That was so easy. That stupid woman, she's so clueless," Emma remarked. "It's not like I wanted her to treat us to a meal. She really should have noticed. She said the shirt wasn't special, right? Well, it didn't look expensive. Also, she has a card made under the fake name Mia," Amelia added. "Really? That's suspicious. People say you can judge a book by its cover." "Hey, what if she was a criminal?" Emma pondered. Their aim was not a dinner together, but my credit card. Specifically, Emma wanted to use my card to pay for an extravagant honeymoon. However, I did not have a credit card. But that evening, Emma booked her honeymoon to Hawaii using the card. I discovered it was an extravagant plan involving a stay at a luxury hotel. The following month, I heard from Aaron that Emma got married without the ceremony and left for her honeymoon. Emma kept talking about marriage, but I thought she was just dreaming. I wonder if she is alright. I have a feeling there's something off about her partner. While having dinner with my husband, I got a call from Emma. As soon as I answered, I heard an extremely excited voice say, "Thanks for the $30,000 gift." "Wait, Emma, aren't you on your honeymoon in Hawaii?" I asked. "That's right, I'm calling from Hawaii right now," she exclaimed. "Sounds like you're having fun, but what do you mean by a $30,000 gift? I paid for this entire animal with your credit card, so you will have to cover the church," Emma revealed. "What do you mean? I used your credit card to pay for everything," she confessed. "What? I don't have a credit card," I exclaimed. "Huh? I thought this card was yours," Emma replied, confusion evident in her voice. After a while, Emma returned from her honeymoon. She was questioned by Aaron and the in-laws for the details, and she eventually spilled the beans. According to Emma, she wanted to go on a honeymoon and also wanted to get back at me for interfering in her marriage. She thought it would be a good idea to pay for the honeymoon using my credit card. She had plotted beforehand, unbeknownst to me, and using the excuse of treating me to a meal, she stole the credit card from my bag. However, the credit card was not mine. Emma committed a crime by unauthorized use of a stranger's credit card, spending $30,000 in total. This is a serious issue. We contacted the credit card company and tried to negotiate a settlement with the owner. Surprisingly, the credit card owner turned out to be our relative, Isabella. Considering the family relationship, we thought the settlement would go smoothly. However, this particular relative was quite eccentric. For some reason, she had a grudge against my mother-in-law and was not someone who would easily forgive us. Together with my in-law's husband and Emma, we visited Isabella's house to apologize. I deeply apologize for what Emma has done. Of course, we will immediately return the $30,000. Isn't this an unauthorized card usage? Doesn't she know that this is a serious crime? Of course, Emma always acts without thinking of the consequences, and this time she used $30,000. We are truly sorry. Give me a reason why I shouldn't go to the police. Forgive her. We're family, right? A crime is a crime, whether we are related or not. It doesn't matter. Also, will Emma herself repay the $30,000 she used without permission? Emma is a part-timer with no savings, so I will initially take on the responsibility of repayment. Do you think just repaying the money will resolve this? Don't joke with me. The discussion between the father-in-law and Isabella didn't progress and ended up dragging on, finally deciding to discuss it again on another day. Later, on the third visit, Isabella finally agreed to the father-in-law paying the $30,000. Moreover, she then demanded an additional compensation of $5,000. The father-in-law complied, even with this unreasonable demand, and transferred a total of $35,000 to the end account. Subsequently, Emma ended up owing $35,000 to her father. To ensure she wouldn't default, a legally valid promissory note was also prepared. Emma's husband, who went on a honeymoon to Hawaii with her, disappeared as soon as he found out about Emma's debt of $35,000. To protect himself, he initiated a divorce and fled from his newlywed wife, Emma. Moreover, he quickly started living with another woman before the divorce procedures were even finalized. He is a 40-year-old man who is 12 years older than Emma, without any savings and can hold a job, but apparently he had a way with the ladies. Emma married him, being charmed by his unreliable yet cute demeanor. I do feel a bit of sympathy for Emma. Furthermore, Emma is the same age as Jacqueline, who is the daughter of Isabella, the owner of the credit card. They went to the same school from elementary to high school, but they were in different classes and had a competitive relationship rather than a friendly one. Jacqueline spread the word to their classmates. Emma is a criminal with a debt of $35,000. Watch out for her. Be careful with your wallet. Consequently, even Emma's old friends started distancing themselves from her. However, after these events, Emma's attitude towards me changed. They used to be competitive with me, but they have slowly started to respect me, and they plan to visit my house again tomorrow. They want me to teach them how to make hamburger steak.
My name's Regina, and I became a single mom when my daughter, Mia, was just 10. My ex-husband, Tom, decided he'd found greener pastures with another woman. Just like that, he was gone, leaving me to pick up the pieces of our shattered family. From that day on, it was just the two of us. I threw myself into work, determined to give Mia everything she needed. I climbed the corporate ladder, worked overtime, took on extra projects, anything to make sure my little girl wouldn't want for anything. The trauma of abandonment hit Mia hard. She became withdrawn, angry. Her grades started slipping, and she'd lash out at the slightest provocation. I was at my wit's end, trying to be both mom and dad, provider and nurturer. Finally, I decided to take her to a psychologist. Dr. Sarah was kind and patient, but even she struggled with Mia's anger. "Your daughter's dealing with a lot of pain," she told me after one particularly difficult session. "It's going to take time, Regina. Be patient with her." Years passed, and things got better, or so I thought. Mia seemed to be healing, growing into a beautiful, intelligent young woman. But there was an undercurrent of resentment that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't until I started trying to date again that I realized the full extent of the damage Tom had done. Every time I'd meet someone new, someone who might actually be interested in me as more than just Mia's mom, she'd fly off the handle. The first time it happened, I was blindsided. I'd been seeing Mark for a few weeks, and things were going well. He was kind, funny, and he seemed to genuinely care about me. I thought it was time for him to meet Mia. "Honey," I said one morning over breakfast. "I've invited someone over for dinner tonight. His name's Mark, and I want the two most important people in my life to know each other." She stared at me, her eyes narrowing. "Is he your boyfriend or something?" I hesitated, not sure how to answer. "We've been seeing each other, yes. But it's not serious yet. That's why I want you to meet him." "No," she said flatly. "I don't want to meet him. I don't want him in our house. Cancel the dinner." I was shocked. "Mia, sweetie, I know this might be difficult for you, but..." "Difficult?" she shouted, standing up so suddenly her chair fell backward. "You think this is difficult? You want to abandon me like he did? To start a new family and forget all about me?" She stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my cold coffee and a sinking feeling in my stomach. I should have known then that this was just the beginning. Despite Mia's outburst, I decided to go ahead with the dinner. I thought maybe if she met Mark, she'd see he wasn't a threat. God, was I wrong? Mark arrived at 7, looking nervous but eager. I introduced him to Mia, who barely looked at him. "Nice to meet you, Mia," he said, extending his hand. "Your mom's told me a lot about you." Mia ignored his hand. "I bet she has," she muttered. The tension was thick as we sat down to eat. I tried to keep the conversation light, but Mia's one-word answers and glares made it difficult. Halfway through the meal, Mark made an innocent comment about how nice it was to have a home-cooked dinner. That's when Mia exploded. "Oh, I'm sure you'd love to have this all the time, wouldn't you?" she sneered. "Playing happy families with my mom?" "Mia," I warned, but she was just getting started. "What, Mom? Isn't that what this is? You trying to replace Dad? Trying to throw me away like he did?" "That's not what this is at all," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm just trying to..." "To what? To ruin everything?" Mia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Well, guess what? I won't let you." Before I could react, she grabbed her plate and hurled it to the floor. The crash of breaking china was deafening in the sudden silence. "Mia," I gasped. "What are you doing?" But she wasn't listening. She grabbed another plate, then another, smashing them on the ground. Food and broken dishes were everywhere. "This is our home," she screamed. "Ours, not his." Mark stood up, looking shell-shocked. "I think I should go," he said quietly. After Mark left, Mia locked herself in her room. I spent the night cleaning up the mess, tears mixing with the soapy water as I scrubbed the floor. The next day, Mia acted like nothing had happened. But something had changed. From that day on, any attempt I made to date was met with hostility and tantrums. Years passed, and I found myself pushing away anyone who showed interest in me. It was easier than dealing with Mia's reactions. I told myself it was temporary, that once Mia was older, she'd understand. But deep down, I knew I was just making excuses. When Mia graduated high school, I was so proud. Despite everything, she'd done well in school and gotten into a good college. I thought maybe now, things would change. "Mom," she said the night before she left for college, you won't bring anyone home while I'm gone, will you?" I sighed. "Mia, honey, you're going to be living your own life now. Don't you think it's time for me to do the same?" Her face darkened. "So you are planning to replace me?" "Mia, please," I begged. "That's not fair. I've spent the last 8 years putting you first. I've given up everything for you." As soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. Mia's eyes filled with tears. "So I'm just a burden to you, is that it?" she cried. "A sacrifice you had to make?" "No, sweetie, that's not what I meant at all." I tried to backtrack, but it was too late. Mia stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. The next morning, she left for college without saying goodbye. With Mia away at college, I finally had a chance to rediscover myself. I started taking better care of myself, got a new haircut, bought some new clothes, even joined a gym. I reconnected with old friends, started going out more. And then I met David. He was kind, funny, and understood my situation with Mia. We started dating, and for a while, everything was perfect. But Mia, even from college, still tried to control my life. Every call, every visit home, she'd grill me about my social life. "Mom, you haven't let anyone into our house, have you?" she'd demand. I tried to reason with her. "Honey, you're living your own life now. Don't you think it's time I did the same?" But she'd get angry, threaten to drop out of college, say she couldn't focus on her studies, knowing I was replacing her. Once, after finding out about David, she called me in tears. "How could you do this to me? My grades are suffering because I'm so upset about you dating." It was exhausting, constantly walking on eggshells, trying to balance my happiness with Mia's demands. But I kept hoping things would get better once she graduated and started her own life. 4 years passed in this push and pull. Then, out of the blue, Mia called. "Mom, I'm coming home. And I'm bringing someone with me." My heart leapt. Maybe she'd finally found someone and understood why I'd wanted to date. Maybe now, things would change. When they arrived, I was shocked. Mia introduced the man beside her not as her boyfriend, but as her husband. "This is Jake," she said, a challenging look in her eyes. "We got married last week in Vegas." I couldn't believe it. My daughter was married, and I hadn't even known she was dating someone. "Mia," I gasped, "why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't I invited?" She shrugged. "We only met a few days ago. It was spontaneous." They didn't stay long. As they were leaving, I hugged Mia tightly. "I hope you'll be very happy," I whispered, trying to ignore the knot of worry in my stomach. For 6 months, I heard little from Mia. I tried to give them space, hoping they were settling into married life. Then, one rainy night, Mia showed up at my door, mascara streaking down her face. "He cheated on me," she sobbed. "I found him with another woman. We're getting divorced." Mia moved back in, quickly found a job, but showed no signs of looking for her own place. And I, remembering how she'd reacted to my attempts at independence, didn't push her. I was 46, Mia was 24, and we were settled into an uneasy coexistence when the doctor delivered the news that shattered our world. I had intestinal cancer. The diagnosis hit me like a freight train. Cancer. The word alone was terrifying. When I told Mia, she broke down in tears. "Mom," she sobbed, clinging to me, "I'll take care of you. I promise. We'll get through this together." In that moment, all our past conflicts seemed to melt away. I quit my job, thankful for the savings I'd squirreled away over the years. At least we wouldn't have to worry about money on top of everything else. The chemotherapy started, and with it came a host of new challenges. I was constantly exhausted, nauseous, and in pain. Mia took time off work to care for me, and at first, she was attentive and enthusiastic. But as the days wore on, the reality of my condition began to wear on her. The cancer had wreaked havoc on my digestive system. I struggled to use the bathroom, often needing help to clean myself afterward. It was humiliating, but I had no choice. After particularly rough chemo sessions, I'd be too weak to even make it to the toilet. I started noticing changes in Mia's behavior. The loving concern in her eyes was gradually replaced by something else, disgust. She'd wrinkle her nose when she came near me, complaining about the smell. "Mom, you stink," she'd say, not even trying to hide her revulsion. "Can't you do something about it?" I wanted to scream at her, to remind her that I was fighting for my life, that I couldn't control what the cancer and chemo were doing to my body. But I bit my tongue. She was trying, in her own way, and that had to be enough. One day, after a particularly difficult morning, Mia approached me with a determined look on her face. "Mom, I think I need to go back to work," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We should hire a nurse to take care of you." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. "I understand. We'll look into getting a nurse." The clinic where I was receiving treatment assigned a nurse named Sarah to help me at home. She was a godsend, strong, capable, and unfailingly kind. She handled my hygiene needs efficiently and without a trace of disgust. "Don't you worry, Regina," she'd say cheerfully as she helped me clean up. "We'll have you feeling fresh as a daisy in no time." With Sarah's help, my quality of life improved dramatically. But Mia wasn't happy about the arrangement. "I don't like having a stranger in our house all the time," she complained. "It's invasive." I tried to explain that Sarah was necessary for my care, but Mia wouldn't listen. Then, one evening, she dropped a bombshell. "Mom, I've been thinking," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Maybe it would be better if you moved to a specialized care facility. I could look after the house, and you'd get round-the-clock care." I stared at her, shocked. "No, I'm not leaving my home. This is where I'm comfortable, and this is where I'm going to fight this cancer." Mia's face clouded over with anger and frustration. "Fine," she snapped. "Have it your way." As she stormed off, I felt a deep sadness settle over me. I was fighting for my life, but it felt like I was losing my daughter in the process. As the chemo treatments continued, my body waged war against itself. Each day brought new challenges, new indignities. But nothing prepared me for the day my hair started falling out in clumps. I was in the bathroom, running my fingers through my long, once beautiful hair, when a handful came away in my palm. I stared at it, numb with shock. Mia's shriek jolted me back to reality. "Mom, there's hair everywhere. I'm sick of cleaning it up." I looked at her, standing in the doorway, her face twisted in disgust and frustration. In that moment, I made a decision. "Sarah," I called weakly to my nurse. "Could you please cut my hair?" As Sarah carefully sheared away my locks, I caught sight of Mia in the mirror. Instead of offering support or comfort, she was laughing. "You look like an alien," she snickered. "Maybe you should get a wig." Her words cut deeper than any surgeon's scalpel. That night, after Sarah had gone home and Mia had retreated to her room, I cried silently into my pillow. Where had I gone wrong? How had my sweet little girl turned into this cruel stranger? Weeks passed, and I continued my battle against cancer. Every day was a struggle, but I was determined to fight. Then, one afternoon, Mia dropped another bombshell. "Mom, I'm having some friends over for my birthday next week," she announced casually. I blinked in surprise. "Here? Honey, I don't think that's a good idea." The noise. "I need rest." Mia's face hardened. "If you don't like it, you can go somewhere else for the night." "Actually, that might be better. I won't have to be embarrassed by you in front of my friends or deal with the smell." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been bedridden for days, barely able to move. But in that moment, fury gave me strength. I pushed myself up, fixing her with a glare that would have made my own mother proud. "This is my house," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "If you don't like living here with me, you're welcome to leave." Mia's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. "You're so selfish," she screamed. "All you think about is yourself. You know what? It would be better for everyone if you just died already. Then you'd stop being such an inconvenience to everyone around you." The room fell silent. I stared at my daughter, unable to believe the words that had just come out of her mouth. In her eyes, I saw no trace of the little girl I'd raised, no hint of love or compassion. Just cold, hard anger. "Get out," I shouted, surprising even myself with the force in my voice. "Pack your things and get out of my house. Now." For a moment, Mia just stood there, shocked. Then, with a scream of frustration, she stormed off to her room. I could hear her throwing things into bags, slamming drawers. Minutes later, she stormed past me, bags in hand. "I hate you," she spat as she reached the door. "I wish Dad had taken me with him when he left." And then she was gone, the front door slamming behind her. She didn't even bother to close it properly. The open door mocked me, a glaring reminder of Mia's dramatic exit. I sat there, staring at it, feeling utterly drained. Finally, I reached for my phone with shaking hands and dialed my friend, Linda. "Linda," I croaked when she answered. "I need help. Can you come over?" Linda arrived in record time, concern etched on her face. She closed the door, then rushed to my side. "Regina, what happened?" The whole story poured out of me, Mia's cruelty, her harsh words, her abrupt departure. Linda listened, her face a mix of shock and anger. "Oh, Regina," she sighed when I finished. "You need to forget about that ungrateful girl and focus on yourself. You're fighting cancer, for God's sake." We talked for hours, tears flowing freely between us. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room, I came to a painful realization. "It's my fault," I whispered. "I raised her to be this way. I always put her needs first, ignored my own. I thought I was being a good mother, but I was just teaching her to be selfish. From now on, I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to think about myself for once." True to my word, I threw myself into my treatment with renewed vigor. Sarah, my nurse, was a godsend, helping me through the worst days with gentle care and unwavering support. 2 more rounds of chemotherapy followed. They were brutal, leaving me weak and nauseous, but I refused to give up. All the while, my phone remained silent. No calls, no texts from Mia. I tried to tell myself it was for the best, that I needed to focus on my health, but the silence hurt more than I cared to admit. Months passed. Then, during a routine checkup, my doctor smiled at me, really smiled, for the first time since my diagnosis. "The cancer's receding, Regina," he said. "You're not out of the woods yet, but this is very, very good news." I left the hospital that day feeling lighter than I had in months. The world seemed brighter somehow, full of possibilities I'd thought were lost to me forever. I was thin, almost gaunt, after months of illness. My clothes hung off me like sacks. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. I started taking short walks in the park near my house, feeling the sun on my face, the breeze in what remained of my hair. One afternoon, I stood in front of my closet, realizing none of my old clothes fit me anymore. Instead of feeling sad, I felt liberated. It was time for a change, inside and out. I spent a day sorting through my wardrobe, making piles to donate to a local homeless shelter. As I packed up bags of my old life, I felt like I was shedding more than just clothes. I was letting go of the old Regina, the one who'd let herself be walked all over, who'd put everyone else's needs before her own. Looking around my big, empty house, I realized it no longer fit the person I'd become. It was time for a change. With my savings providing a comfortable cushion, I made a bold decision: I wouldn't return to work. Instead, I'd downsize and focus on living. I contacted a realtor and put my house on the market. It sold quickly, and I found a small, cozy apartment that felt like it was made for me. It was perfect for one person, bright, manageable, and full of potential for a fresh start. I invested the remaining money from the house sale, feeling financially secure for the first time in years. Life was good, peaceful. I spent my days exploring my new neighborhood, trying new hobbies, and simply enjoying the act of being alive. Then, 3 months after I'd settled into my new life, I received an unexpected call. It was the realtor who'd handled the sale of my old house. "Mrs. Walker," he said, sounding uncomfortable, "the new owners of your old house are having some issues. They've asked for your contact information. Is it all right if I give them your number?" Curious and a little concerned, I agreed. Shortly after, my phone rang again. This time, it was the new owner, a Mr. Thompson. "Mrs. Walker," he began, his voice tense, "I'm sorry to bother you, but something strange happened today. A young woman tried to break into our house. She tried to use a key at first, then started trying to force the door open. When I confronted her, she became hysterical, screaming that this was her house, that she should inherit it after her mother's death." The blood drained from my face. Mia. It had to be Mia. She thought I was dead and had come to claim her inheritance. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thompson," I said, my voice shaking. I think that might have been my daughter. We'd been estranged. She must have assumed." "Your daughter?" He sounded shocked. "But she said you were dead." "I've been very ill, we haven't spoken in months," I explained, not wanting to go into details. "Mr. Thompson, could I ask a favor? If she comes back, would you call me?" He agreed, and we ended the call. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue with my new, peaceful life. But I knew I couldn't. This confrontation had been coming for a long time. It was time to face Mia, to finally say all the things I should have said years ago. The call came sooner than I expected. Just a day after my conversation with Mr. Thompson, my phone rang. "She's here," Mr. Thompson said, his voice tense. "And she's causing quite a scene." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I'm on my way." The drive to my old house felt surreal. As I pulled up, I could hear the shouting before I even got out of the car. Mia's voice, shrill and angry, carried across the yard. "This is my house," she was screaming at the Thompsons, who stood on the porch looking shocked and frightened. "Get out now." I stepped out of my car, and for a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Mia turned, her eyes landing on me. The look of shock on her face quickly morphed into one of fury. "You," she spat. "You're supposed to be dead." I felt a calm settle over me, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around us. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, Mia," I said, my voice steady. Mia's face contorted with rage. "What's going on? Why are these people in our house?" "It's not our house anymore, Mia," I explained. "I sold it." Her eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in anger. "You can't do that. It was supposed to be mine. I was supposed to inherit it when you died." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "I'm sorry I inconvenienced you by surviving." Mia's face turned red. "You don't understand. I have debts, I need money." I shook my head, acutely aware of the Thompsons and the small crowd of neighbors who had gathered to watch the spectacle. "I don't owe you anything, Mia. You abandoned me when I was fighting for my life. You wished me dead. Why should I help you now?" "Because you're my mother," she screamed. "You're supposed to take care of me." I felt a sadness wash over me, but I stood my ground. "No, Mia, not anymore. You're an adult. Your choices, your consequences." Mia's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "You know what? Dad was right to leave you. You're useless. It would have been better if you had died." Her words hung in the air, shocking even the onlookers into silence. But this time, they didn't cut me to the core. This time, I felt only pity for the angry, bitter woman my daughter had become. Without another word, I turned and walked back to my car. Before getting in, I addressed the Thompsons. "If she comes back or tries to break in again, call the police," I said, gesturing towards Mia. "She has no right to be here." As I drove away, I caught a last glimpse of Mia in my rearview mirror, her face a mask of shock and fury. But for the first time, her anger didn't touch me. I was free. In the months that followed, I embraced my new life fully. I took up painting, finding joy in splashing colors across canvas. My health continued to improve, and each day I felt stronger, more alive. Mia never called or tried to contact me again. Sometimes I felt a pang of sadness for the relationship we'd lost, but mostly I felt relief. I had spent so many years trying to fill the bottomless pit of her needs. Now, finally, I was living for myself. The name's Rachel, and I'm the oldest of 2 daughters. From as far back as I can remember, I was the serious one, the independent one. My sister Lily? She was the complete opposite. Growing up, our house was always filled with noise. Lily's laughter, Mom and Dad's doting words, the constant buzz of the latest pop songs. Me? I preferred the quiet corners, nose buried in a book or scribbling away at my homework. Birthdays and holidays were a stark reminder of how different Lily and I were. While she'd tear through her gifts, squealing with delight at the latest trendy clothes or gadgets, I'd carefully set aside the money I received. "What are you saving for this time, Ratch?" Dad would ask, a hint of pride in his voice that never quite reached his eyes. "A laptop for studying," I'd reply. "The library computers are always full." He'd nod, but I could see the disconnect. They never quite understood why I didn't want the things other girls my age did. Lily, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of ever-changing styles and demands. "Mom, did you see the new iPhone? Everyone at school has one. I need it." And just like that, she'd have it. No questions asked, no saving required. I remember the day I finally bought my laptop. I'd saved for months, researching the best model for my needs. When I brought it home, I was bursting with pride. "Look, I finally got it," I announced at dinner. Mom glanced up from her plate. "That's nice, dear. Oh, Lily, tell us about your day at the mall." And just like that, the conversation shifted. Lily launched into a detailed description of her latest shopping spree, and my achievement faded into the background. It wasn't that they didn't love me. I knew they did, in their own way. But Lily was the sun in our family's solar system, and I was a distant planet, quietly orbiting on my own path. As we grew older, the differences only became more pronounced. While Lily experimented with wild hairstyles and the latest fashion trends, I stuck to my practical ponytail and comfortable jeans. The library became my second home, a quiet sanctuary where I could focus on my goals without distraction. When it came time for college, I threw myself into applications with the same determination I'd shown throughout high school. I spent countless nights perfecting my essays, researching scholarships, and studying for entrance exams. The day I received my acceptance letter, along with a full scholarship, was one of the proudest moments of my life. I burst into the kitchen, waving the letter. "Mom, Dad, I got in. Full ride." Mom looked up from where she was helping Lily with her makeup. "Oh, that's nice, dear." "Lily, hold still, I'm trying to get this eyeliner perfect." Dad glanced over his newspaper. "Good job, Rachel." We expected nothing less. Their lukewarm response stung, but I was used to it. I retreated to my room, clutching the letter to my chest. This was my ticket out, my chance to prove myself. Meanwhile, Lily barely scraped through high school. The day she brought home her mediocre report card, I expected our parents to finally show some disappointment. Instead, they rallied around her. "Oh, sweetie, don't worry about it," Mom cooed, stroking Lily's hair. "College isn't for everyone. You're talented in so many other ways." Dad nodded in agreement. "That's right, princess. You'll find your path." I couldn't believe my ears. Are you kidding me? She barely passed. Mom shot me a sharp look. Rachel, don't be cruel. Your sister has other gifts. I bit my tongue and retreated once again. It was clear that no matter what I achieved, Lily would always be the favorite. College was a breath of fresh air. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued hard work and ambition. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make the most of this opportunity. One day, during my sophomore year, I got a call from home. It was Lily, her voice bubbly with excitement. Rach, guess what? I'm thinking of taking some beauty courses. Mom and Dad think it's a great idea. I wanted to tell her about the fascinating research project I was working on, about the internship I'd landed for the summer. But I knew she wouldn't care. As I hung up, I couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and determination. I was on my own path, and I was going to make it count. The years flew by. While Lily flitted from one beauty course to another, never quite finishing anything, I graduated with honors. I landed a job at a prestigious company before the ink was dry on my diploma. The day I moved into my own apartment was bittersweet. As I unpacked my meager belongings, I thought about how different my life was from Lily's. She was still living at home, being pampered by our parents. But I was standing on my own 2 feet, ready to take on the world. My first few months at work were a whirlwind. I worked longer hours than anyone else, determined to prove myself. My dedication didn't go unnoticed. Within a year, I was promoted to team leader. I called home to share the news. Mom answered, "Oh, Rachel, that's nice. But guess what? Lily's met the most wonderful boy. He comes from such a good family. We're all so excited." As she rattled on about Lily's new boyfriend, my promotion faded into the background. I hung up feeling deflated but more determined than ever. If my family couldn't appreciate my achievements, I'd just have to achieve even more. I threw myself into my work like a woman possessed. Days blurred into nights, weekends became just another opportunity to get ahead. My dedication paid off. I got another promotion, then another. Before I knew it, I was head of the department, the youngest in the company's history. Mr. Thompson, the owner, called me into his office one day. "Rachel, your work has been exceptional. We've never had someone rise through the ranks so quickly." I beamed with pride. "Thank you, sir. I love what I do." He smiled. "It shows. That's why I want to offer you something special. We have a program for our top employees, a chance to buy an apartment at a significant discount. You've more than earned it." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork and planning. When I finally got the keys, I felt like I was walking on air. I decided to throw a housewarming party, a chance to celebrate my success with the people who mattered most. I didn't have much furniture yet, so I bought some inexpensive plastic tables and chairs. I arranged everything carefully, making sure the disposable tableware matched the decor. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. The day of the party arrived. My colleagues showed up first, bearing gifts and warm congratulations. Then my family arrived. Mom, Dad, and Lily swept in like a whirlwind. I noticed Lily's eyes darting around, taking in the modest furnishings with a barely concealed smirk. As the evening wore on, I noticed a pattern. Every time one of my colleagues tried to congratulate me or mention my accomplishments, my parents would swiftly change the subject to Lily. "Oh, that reminds me," Mom would say, cutting off my coworker mid-sentence. "Did Rachel tell you about Lily's latest modeling gig? She's just so photogenic." Dad would chime in. "Yes, our Lily was born for the spotlight. Such natural talent." I saw the confused and slightly horrified looks on my colleagues' faces. I wanted to sink into the floor. Lily, for her part, basked in the attention. "Oh, Mom, stop it," she'd say with a giggle, clearly loving every moment. Finally, mercifully, my family left. As soon as the door closed behind them, my coworker Sarah turned to me, her eyes wide. Rachel, what the hell was that? She asked, her voice low and concerned. I shrugged, trying to play it off. Oh, that's just how they are. Another colleague, Mark, shook his head. No, Rachel, that's not normal. Are you okay? Do you need help? I felt a lump forming in my throat. Their concern was touching, but also embarrassing. Guys, really, it's fine. I'm used to it. Who wants another drink? As I busied myself in the kitchen, I could hear them whispering, their concern palpable. I blinked back tears, determined not to let them see how much my family's behavior had affected me. After the housewarming fiasco, I threw myself back into work with renewed vigor. Months flew by, and slowly but surely, I transformed my apartment into a space that truly felt like home. Every piece of furniture, every splash of color on the walls was a testament to my hard work and independence. One sunny Saturday, I decided to treat myself to something I'd been eyeing for a while, a car. Nothing flashy, just a reliable sedan that would get me from point A to point B. As I drove it home, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was mine, bought with my own money, a symbol of my success. I hadn't planned on telling my family, but news travels fast. The phone rang that evening, and Lily's voice chirped through the speaker. Rach, I heard you bought a car. That's nice, she said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. You're really doing this the hard way. All this working and saving, it's so unnecessary. I felt my hackles rise. What do you mean? Well, the main task of a woman is to get married properly, silly. Find a man who'll support you and give you everything you need. Why work yourself to the bone when you could have it all handed to you? I was speechless for a moment. Was she serious? Lily, that's not. I want to earn things for myself. I'm proud of what I've accomplished. She laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. Oh, Rach, always the difficult one. Well, you'll see. I'll show you how it's done. Before I could respond, she had hung up. I stared at the phone, a mix of anger and disbelief swirling in my gut. How could we see the world so differently? A few months later, I got my answer. Lily called, her voice bubbling with excitement. Rachel, you'll never guess what happened. I'm getting married. His name is Robert. He's absolutely loaded, Rach. His parents are paying for the whole wedding. It's going to be gorgeous. As she rattled off details about dresses and flowers and guest lists, I felt a strange hollowness in my chest. This was what she had been working towards, I realized. This was her version of success. The day of the wedding arrived all too soon. I stood in the grand hall, feeling out of place among the glittering guests. Lily was radiant in her designer gown, and our parents couldn't stop gushing. I sipped my champagne, trying to quell the bitterness rising in my throat. Had they ever looked at me with such pride? Had they ever been this happy for my accomplishments? As the evening wore on, I felt more and more like an outsider. Lily was in her element, charming guests and basking in the attention. Our parents flitted about, proudly introducing themselves as the parents of the bride. As I drove home in my modest car, to my modest apartment that I'd worked so hard for, I couldn't help but wonder, had I made the right choices? Was Lily right? Had I chosen the harder path? But then I thought about my job, my achievements, the sense of pride I felt every time I accomplished something on my own. No, I decided. My path might be harder, but it was mine. And that made all the difference. After Lily's wedding, life settled into a new rhythm. Work kept me busy, but my mother's frequent calls became an unwelcome interruption. Every conversation was the same. Rachel, darling, Mom would start, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You'll never believe what Lily's been up to. I'd brace myself as she launched into another tale of Lily's fabulous new life. She's been invited to the most exclusive gatherings. Can you believe it? Our Lily, rubbing elbows with high society. One day, after a particularly trying call, I couldn't hold back anymore. Mom, that's great for Lily, but don't you want to know what's going on in my life? There was a pause. "Oh, honey," she said, her tone patronizing. "Of course we care. But you really should learn from your sister. Be more beautiful, get things easily. Why work all day for pennies when you could have it all?" A few weeks later, an invitation arrived. Lily and Robert were having a housewarming party for their new luxury apartment, a gift from his parents, of course. The night of the party, I stood outside their building, feeling small. I smoothed down my simple dress and took a deep breath before heading in. The apartment was stunning. Every surface gleamed, every piece of furniture looked like it cost more than my yearly salary. My parents were already there, cooing over every detail. I tried to blend into the background, but Lily spotted me. She sauntered over, champagne flute in hand. "Rachel, so glad you could make it," she said, her eyes scanning my outfit critically. "I hope you're taking notes. This is how a housewarming should be done. None of that plastic furniture and disposable dish nonsense like at your place." I felt my cheeks burn. "Lily, that's..." But she was already moving on, leaving me with the sting of her words. The weeks that followed were a parade of Lily's extravagance. She seemed to buy everything in sight, always the most expensive option. Then came the car. I was leaving work one evening when a sleek sports car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, revealing Lily's smug face. "Like it?" she preened. "Just a little gift from Robert. Thought I'd take it for a spin." I glanced at my reliable but unremarkable sedan. "It's very nice, Lily." She followed my gaze and laughed. "Oh, Rachel. Always settling for less. You'll always be working for others, while I live the good life. Ta-da." 2 years flew by in a blur of spreadsheets, meetings, and promotions. While I climbed the corporate ladder, Lily seemed content to climb from one shopping spree to the next. Our paths couldn't have been more different, but I'd made my peace with it. Or so I thought. It was a regular Tuesday when my world tilted on its axis. Mom called, her voice uncharacteristically shaky. "Rachel, it's Lily. She's back home, Robert left her. He said she was too shallow, too focused on spending his money. Called her stupid, can you believe it? He had her sign a prenup, so she's got nothing." I felt a mix of emotions, shock, concern, and if I'm being honest, a tiny flicker of vindication. I squashed it down immediately, ashamed of myself. "I'm coming over," I said, already grabbing my keys. When I arrived at my parents' house, it was like walking into a war zone. I could hear Lily's screams from the driveway. Inside, it was worse. Lily was in the living room, mascara streaking down her face, her designer clothes torn. She was throwing anything she could get her hands on, vases, picture frames, cushions. "He can't do this to me," she shrieked. "I'm Lily, I'm beautiful, I'm perfect." Mom and Dad fluttered around her, trying to calm her down. "Sweetie, please," Mom pleaded. "We'll figure this out. Daddy will buy you a new dress, won't you, dear?" Dad nodded frantically. "Of course, princess, anything you want." I stood there, watching this scene unfold, feeling like I was in some bizarre alternate reality. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't how life was supposed to work, was it? As the days passed, Lily's tantrums didn't subside. She'd cry for hours, then scream, then demand expensive gifts to make herself feel better. Our parents, ever eager to please their favorite, complied with every request. One evening, after a particularly bad episode, I couldn't hold my tongue anymore. "Maybe," I said cautiously, "Lily should consider getting a job? It might help her appreciate the value of money and give her something to focus on besides all this." The room went dead silent. Then all hell broke loose. Lily's face contorted in rage. "A job like you? Slaving away day after day like some peasant?" She burst into tears and ran upstairs, slamming her door so hard the house shook. Before I could process what had happened, Mom and Dad rounded on me. "How dare you?" Mom hissed. Your sister is going through a terrible time, and you suggest she lower herself to your level? But I didn't mean, I tried to explain, but they weren't listening. Get out, Dad said, his voice cold. Get out of this house right now. Mom pointed to the door. Out. And don't come back until you can be supportive of your sister. In a daze, I grabbed my purse and left. As I walked into my apartment, my sanctuary, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness at being rejected by my family, anger at their blindness to Lily's faults, and oddly, a sense of relief. For the first time, I saw clearly how toxic my family dynamic had been all these years. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Just days after the blowout with my family, I received news that left me speechless. I'd won a company contest. The prize? A 4-month around-the-world cruise. In a moment of weakness, or perhaps hope, I called my parents. Maybe this good news would bridge the gap between us. Mom, Dad, you won't believe it. I won a cruise around the world. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, my mother's cold voice cut through. Rachel, how can you be so selfish? Your sister is going through a terrible time, and you're bragging about vacations? I felt like I'd been slapped. I'm not bragging, I just thought. Mom interrupted. If you had any decency, you'd give that ticket to Lily. She needs a change of scenery. You can stay home and work, like you always do. Something snapped inside me. Years of pent-up frustration came pouring out. No, I said firmly. I won this trip. I earned it. I'm not giving it up because Lily made poor life choices. I'm going. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. I packed my bags, put my affairs in order, and on the day of departure, I turned off my phone. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. The cruise was everything I'd dreamed of and more. I watched sunsets in the Mediterranean, explored ancient ruins in Greece, marveled at the bustling streets of Hong Kong. For 4 glorious months, I was just Rachel, not the responsible older sister, not the family disappointment. Just me. But all good things must come to an end. As the ship docked back home, reality came crashing back. I turned on my phone, bracing myself for the barrage of messages. Surprisingly, there were only a few missed calls from my parents. Feeling lighter than I had in years, I headed home. But as I approached my apartment door, I heard noises inside. My heart raced. Had someone broken in? I cautiously opened the door, only to find myself face to face with Lily. She was sprawled on my couch, surrounded by shopping bags and empty takeout containers. Lily? I gasped. What are you doing here? She looked up, barely fazed by my sudden appearance. Oh, you're back. Finally. I stood there, key still in hand, trying to process the scene before me. How did you get in here? Lily rolled her eyes. Don't be dense, Rachel. I used the spare keys you gave Mom and Dad. I needed a change of scenery. Everything at home reminded me of, you know. I stood there, staring at Lily, trying to process everything. This was too much. I needed air. I'm going to the store, I muttered, grabbing my car keys and heading for the door. But when I reached the parking lot, my car was nowhere to be seen. Panic rising, I called my parents. Mom answered, her voice sickly sweet. Rachel, dear, how was your trip? Where's my car? I demanded, cutting to the chase. There was a pause. Then Dad's voice came on the line. We sold it. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. You, what? Lily needed cheering up, Mom explained, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. We used the money to take her shopping, to the spa. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That was my car. You had no right. Now, Rachel, Dad's stern voice cut in. We're family. What's yours is ours. Don't be so selfish. Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration, resentment, and anger came pouring out. Selfish? You steal my car, invade my home, and I'm selfish? I want my money back. Now. Their response was immediate and harsh. They called me heartless, ungrateful, a disappointment. The words stung, but for the first time, they didn't break me. I hung up and marched back to my apartment. Lily was still there, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "Get out," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Lily looked up, shocked. "What?" "Get out now." She tried to argue, to manipulate me like she always had, but I stood firm. For once in my life, I put myself first. The next day, I hired a lawyer and sued my parents for the value of the car. They were furious, threatening to disown me, to cut me out of their will. But I stood my ground. The case went to court. It was a grueling process, laying out years of emotional manipulation and financial abuse for strangers to judge. But in the end, justice prevailed. The judge ruled in my favor. My parents were forced to sell their house to repay me. They moved into a small apartment, all the while painting me as the villain who had ruined their lives. But for once, their words couldn't touch me. As I drove my new car home from the dealership, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. Free from expectations, free from manipulation, free to be myself. I cut off all contact with my family. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. The first few months were hard. There were moments of doubt, of loneliness. But slowly, I began to build a life on my own terms. I threw myself into my work, rising quickly through the ranks. I made new friends who appreciated me for who I was, not what I could do for them. I traveled, I learned new skills, I found hobbies that brought me joy. And most importantly, I learned to love myself. To appreciate my strength, my determination, my worth. Now, as I sit in my office, looking out over the city, I can't help but smile. The path I chose wasn't easy, but it was mine. I built this life brick by brick, decision by decision. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I remember my childhood like it was yesterday. The smell of my dad's aftershave, the sound of his keys jingling as he came home from work. I'm Alice, and this is my story. I was born into what you'd call an ordinary family. Mom, Dad, and me. But from the get-go, it was clear who my favorite was. Dad. He was my hero, my everything. Every day, I'd wait by the window, my nose pressed against the glass, waiting for his car to pull up. The moment I saw him, I'd bolt to the door, ready to jump into his arms. "There's my little princess," he'd say, scooping me up and spinning me around. I'd giggle, burying my face in his neck, breathing in that familiar scent that meant safety and love. Mom? Well, she was there. Physically, at least. Emotionally? Not so much. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with this weird expression, like I was some kind of burden she hadn't signed up for. But Dad made up for it. Every evening, rain or shine, we'd go for walks. He'd point out different trees, teach me about birds, or just let me ramble on about my day at kindergarten. Bedtime was the best. Dad would tuck me in, pull out a book, and transport us both to magical worlds. His voice would change for each character, making me laugh or gasp in all the right places. But when I turned 5, everything changed. I remember the day they sat me down. Mom looked relieved, Dad looked heartbroken. "Alice, honey," Dad started, his voice cracking. "Mommy and Daddy, we're not going to be living together anymore." I didn't understand at first. "Like when you go on business trips?" I asked. Mom cut in, her voice flat. "No, Alice, we're getting divorced. But don't worry, you'll be staying with your father. It's better this way." I looked at Dad, tears welling up in his eyes. He pulled me close, and I could feel him shaking. He said everything would be okay, but even at 5, I knew, nothing would ever be the same again. The divorce hit me hard, but Dad did his best to make things normal. We moved to a new neighborhood with a good school nearby. I remember the day we arrived at our new house. "What do you think, Alice?" Dad asked, his eyes hopeful. I looked at the unfamiliar building and felt a lump in my throat. "It's big," I managed to say. Dad knelt down beside me. "I know it's different, sweetheart. But we'll make it our home together, okay?" I nodded, trying to be brave for him. The new school was okay, I guess. I made some friends, but I missed my old life. Dad tried to keep our routines, walks in the evening, bedtime stories, but something had changed. There was a sadness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Mom? She became like a ghost in my life. She'd call sometimes, her voice distant and distracted. "How's school, Alice?" she'd ask, but I could tell she didn't really care about the answer. Once in a while, she'd take me for a weekend. It was always awkward, like we were strangers forced to spend time together. I'd come home to Dad, relief washing over me as I stepped through the door. One day, when I was 6, Dad sat me down with a serious look on his face. "Alice, honey, I've got some news," he said, fidgeting with his hands. "I've met someone. Her name is Sarah, and, well, we're getting married. Sarah is nice, I promise. You'll like her." I didn't want to like her. I wanted things to stay as they were, just me and Dad. But life had other plans. Sarah moved in, and suddenly our quiet house was full of noise and change. She tried to be nice, always smiling too brightly, asking too many questions. "Alice, sweetie, what would you like for dinner?" she'd ask, her voice syrupy sweet. "Whatever," I'd mutter, retreating to my room. Then came the biggest change of all. I was in the living room, watching TV, when Dad and Sarah came in, both grinning from ear to ear. "Alice, we have wonderful news," Sarah gushed. "You're going to be a big sister." I looked at Dad, hoping to see some sign that this was a joke. But he was beaming, his hand on Sarah's stomach. "Isn't it great, princess?" he said. "You'll have a little brother or sister to play with." I forced a smile, but inside, I felt like screaming. A baby? How could he do this? Didn't he love me enough? Months passed, and Sarah's belly grew bigger. Dad spent more and more time fussing over her, buying baby things, talking about names. I felt like I was fading into the background. The day the baby was born, I was left with a neighbor. When Dad finally came to get me, he looked exhausted but happy. "Come meet your baby brother, Alice," he said. At the hospital, I peered into the crib at the tiny, red-faced bundle. I looked at the baby, then at Dad, who was gazing at his new son with such love it made my heart hurt. Life changed fast after Tommy was born. Dad was completely wrapped up in his new family, and I felt like I was fading into the background. The walks, the bedtime stories, the special moments, they all disappeared, replaced by diaper changes and late-night feedings. Sarah, my stepmother, barely hid her annoyance with me. I'd catch her giving me these looks, like I was some unwanted houseguest who'd overstayed my welcome. One day, I overheard her talking to Dad in the kitchen. "John, why don't we see if Alice's mother wants her back? It might be better for everyone." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Dad's voice was sharp when he replied, "Absolutely not. Alice is my daughter, and this is her home. I expect you to treat her like your own." After that, Sarah was careful not to say anything outright mean to me, but the damage was done. I knew where I stood in her eyes, a burden, an obstacle to her perfect little family. As the years went by, I learned to fend for myself. Dad was always busy with Tommy, teaching him to walk, to talk, attending his little league games. I grew up in the shadows, becoming fiercely independent out of necessity. High school graduation came and went. Dad, true to his word, paid for my college tuition. "It's from the money your mom's been sending all these years," he explained. "I've been saving it for your education." I was surprised. I'd assumed Mom had just disappeared from my life completely. But I was grateful for the chance to get away, to start fresh in a new city. College flew by. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make something of myself. I graduated with a degree in financial management, feeling proud and accomplished. But when I returned home, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. The house felt different, smaller somehow. Sarah greeted me with a tight smile. "Oh, Alice, you're back. We weren't expecting you so soon." I lugged my bags upstairs, only to find my childhood bedroom completely transformed. Where my bed used to be, there was now a treadmill. My desk had been replaced by a huge TV and gaming console. The walls, once covered in my posters, were now bare. "Tommy needed a rec room," Sarah explained, not even trying to sound apologetic. "You can sleep on the couch in the living room. It's just temporary, right?" I stood there, staring at the stranger my room had become, feeling more out of place than ever. "Right," I mumbled. "Temporary." The job search was tough, but I finally landed an entry-level position at a local firm. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. Every night, I'd scour apartment listings, looking for something, anything, I could afford. "Maybe you could find a roommate," Dad suggested one evening, in a rare moment of attention. "Split the rent?" I nodded, adding another search parameter to my list. But decent, affordable apartments with potential roommates were hard to come by. So, I stayed. Every morning, I'd wake up on that uncomfortable couch, tiptoe around Tommy's toys scattered across the living room floor, and head to work. Every evening, I'd come back to Sarah's cold stares and Dad's distracted nods. Months dragged on, and I was still stuck in limbo, sleeping on the couch and searching for a way out. Tommy had started high school, and suddenly the house was abuzz with excitement, but not for me. "John, darling," Sarah cooed one evening, her voice sickly sweet. "Don't you think Tommy needs a car? All his friends are driving now." I nearly choked on my dinner. Tommy was barely 15, for crying out loud. Dad, ever the pushover when it came to his precious son, nodded. "You're right, honey. We'll go car shopping this weekend." And just like that, Tommy got a shiny new car. Never mind that he couldn't legally drive it yet. I bit my tongue, trying to swallow the bitterness rising in my throat. My birthday rolled around a few weeks later. For once, I decided to ask for something. I approached Dad cautiously. "Hey, Dad? I was wondering, could I maybe get a laptop for my birthday? I could pick up some freelance work online, make some extra money." Before Dad could respond, Sarah swooped in, her face twisted with anger. "A laptop? Are you serious, Alice? You're already living here rent-free, eating our food, and now you want more?" Her voice dripped with venom. "You're nothing but a money-grubbing freeloader." I stood there, shocked into silence, as she continued her tirade. "Have you no shame? Your father just paid for your entire college education, and here you are, asking for more expensive gifts." She was on a roll now, tears springing to her eyes in a dramatic display. "What about Tommy's future? At this rate, he'll never be able to go to college, because his greedy sister is bleeding us dry." "Sarah, that's enough." Dad's voice cut through her performance. "We have a separate account for Tommy's college fund. It's all taken care of, so please, calm down." Sarah huffed and stormed out of the room, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. Dad sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I'm sorry about that, Alice. We'll talk about the laptop later, okay?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As soon as I could, I escaped to the backyard, needing some air. Sitting on the old swing set, I let the tears I'd been holding back fall freely. Sarah's words echoed in my head, each one a dagger to my heart. I wiped my eyes, a new resolve settling over me. I wouldn't ask for anything ever again. I'd find a way to make it on my own, without their help or their judgment. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, life decided to prove me wrong. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when all hell broke loose. Dad burst into the living room, his face red with fury. "Where is it?" he bellowed, making me jump. "Where's my damn money?" Sarah and Tommy came running, eyes wide with shock. I sat there, frozen, as Dad continued his tirade. "Someone's been using my card. The one for Tommy's college fund." He was pacing now, hands shaking. Jewelry stores, electronics. Who the hell's been spending my money? His eyes landed on me, narrowing with suspicion. Alice, did you take my cards? Have you been in my wallet? I felt like I'd been doused in ice water. What? No, Dad, I would never. But he wasn't listening. He was on a rampage, tearing through the room like a tornado. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. John, check her backpack. It's right there. Before I could protest, Dad grabbed my bag. I watched in horror as he dumped its contents onto the couch. Books, papers, pens, and there, gleaming in the midst of it all, was a brand new laptop. The room fell silent. I stared at the laptop, my mind reeling. I hadn't bought this. Dad's voice was dangerously low. You thieving little. Dad, no, I didn't do this, I pleaded, panic rising in my throat. I don't know where that came from. And jewelry? Why would I buy jewelry? Call the police. Check the store cameras. You'll see it wasn't me. But my words fell on deaf ears. Sarah stepped forward, her face a mask of righteous indignation. John, can't you see? She has no respect for you. She's lying to your face, even with the evidence right in front of her. She turned to me, eyes glinting with triumph. We should have known you'd do something like this. Always wanting more, never satisfied with what you have. Dad's next words hit me like a physical blow. Get out. What? I whispered, not believing what I was hearing. Get out of my house, he roared. You ungrateful. I never want to see you again. Get your things and leave now. Numbly, I gathered what I could. Clothes, toiletries, my phone charger. It all went into a duffel bag I found in the closet. The whole time, Dad stood there, watching me with a mixture of anger and disgust that broke my heart. As I headed for the door, Sarah's parting shot hit me. We should have done this years ago. Good riddance to bad rubbish. The door slammed behind me, and just like that, I was alone. Homeless. Accused of a crime I didn't commit. As the reality of my situation sank in, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. The house behind me had stopped being a home long ago. Maybe this was the push I needed to truly start my own life. That first night after being kicked out was a blur. I found myself in a dingy hostel, clutching my duffel bag like a lifeline. Sleep eluded me as I lay on the lumpy mattress, my mind racing with unanswered questions and fear for the future. The next day at work, I must have looked as lost as I felt. My colleague, Jessica, cornered me in the break room. All right, spill it. What's going on with you? She demanded, her concern evident. Before I knew it, I was pouring out the whole sordid story. Jessica listened, her eyes widening with each new detail. That's insane, she said when I finished. Then, without missing a beat, move in with me. I've been looking for a roommate anyway. We can split the rent. It'll be perfect. And just like that, I had a lifeline. I moved in with Jessica that weekend, grateful beyond words for her kindness. 2 years passed in a whirlwind. I threw myself into work, determined to prove to myself, and everyone else, that I could make it on my own. I didn't speak to Dad at all during this time. The pain of his betrayal was still too raw. Mom tried to reach out a few times, but our conversations were strained. It was clear Dad had told her about the alleged theft. Her disappointment was palpable, even over the phone. Eventually, those calls stopped too. But life has a way of moving forward, whether you're ready or not. I got promoted at work, started earning enough to consider my own place. I picked up new hobbies, yoga, painting, anything to keep my mind occupied. I even started dating again, though nothing serious. Finally, I took the plunge and rented my own apartment. It was small, but it was mine. No judgmental stares, no walking on eggshells. Just peace and independence. I was just settling into my new routine when the unexpected happened. There was a knock at my door one Saturday afternoon. I opened it, and there stood Dad. He looked older, more haggard than I remembered. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying. "Can I come in?" he choked out. "Your mother gave me the address. Alice, I need to talk to you." I stood there, arms crossed, waiting. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to throw him out like he'd done to me. But another part, a part one thought I'd buried, wanted desperately to hear what he had to say. Dad took a deep breath. "I found out what really happened 2 years ago," he began, his voice shaking. It wasn't you. It was Sarah." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "What?" He nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "She framed you. She's the one who took my credit cards, who bought all that stuff. I found jewelry, clothes, all hidden away in her things. Price tags still on them and everything." I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Dad's words washed over me, each one a mix of vindication and reopened wounds. I sat there, stunned, as Dad continued his story. His voice trembled with a mix of anger and regret as he recounted the events that led to this moment. "After I found the jewelry, I started paying closer attention," he said, running a hand through his graying hair. "One night, I caught Sarah red-handed, going through my wallet. She was taking my credit cards, Alice. I felt a lump form in my throat. All this time, I'd been right. But the vindication tasted bitter." Dad went on, his words tumbling out faster now. "I confronted her, and it all came spilling out. She's been shopping compulsively for years. At first, she said it was all for Tommy. But now? She's maxed out credit cards, taken out loans, all for stuff we don't need." I shook my head, disbelief warring with a perverse sense of satisfaction. "And the laptop? The one you found in my bag?" Dad's face crumpled. "She planted it there. Bought it with my card and slipped it into your things. God, Alice, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you." The apology hung in the air between us, heavy and insufficient. "I told her she needed help," Dad continued. "Begged her to see a therapist, to get treatment for her shopping addiction. But she refused. Said there was nothing wrong with her." I could picture it, Sarah, defiant and unapologetic. Just like she'd been the day they kicked me out. And then, Dad's voice dropped to a near whisper, "She said she was right to frame you. That she'd do it again if she had the chance." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the couch, steadying myself. "That was it for me," Dad said. "I filed for divorce the next day. Kicked her out of the house. I couldn't live with someone who'd hurt my daughter like that." He looked at me then, his eyes pleading. "Alice, I know I don't deserve it, but please, can you forgive me? I was blind, and stupid, and I hurt you so badly. I'm so sorry." I stared at him, this man who had once been my hero. The father who'd read me bedtime stories and taught me to ride a bike. The same father who'd thrown me out without a second thought, who'd believed the worst of me so easily. For a moment, I was that scared, heartbroken girl again, standing on the sidewalk with nowhere to go. The pain of that betrayal washed over me anew. "Dad," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't forgive you. Not now, maybe not ever. You didn't just kick me out. You believed I could do something so terrible. You didn't even try to hear my side. And for 2 years, Dad, you didn't call, didn't check if I was okay." Dad nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I understand," he choked out. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I needed you to know the truth." I stood up, suddenly needing space. "Thank you for telling me, but I think you should go now." As the door closed behind him, I sank to the floor, emotions overwhelming me. The truth was out, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like reopening a wound that had never really healed. After Dad left, I thought I'd finally have peace. But life had other plans. My phone started ringing incessantly, Mom, trying to play peacemaker. "Alice, honey," she'd plead, "your father is truly sorry. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive him?" Each call left me more frustrated than the last. "Mom, please. I'm not ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But she wouldn't let up. One evening, I opened my door to find both my parents standing there. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, anger bubbling up inside me. Mom pushed past me into the apartment, Dad trailing behind looking sheepish. "Alice, this has gone on long enough," she started, her voice stern. "Your father made a mistake, but he's apologized. You have no right to hold this grudge. Think of all the good things he's done for you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No right? He kicked me out. He believed I was a thief. Where was all this support when I was sleeping on a friend's couch, trying to rebuild my life? Mom opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "No, I'm done. Both of you, please leave. And don't come back. If you keep pushing this, I'll get a restraining order." I mean it. The shock on their faces would have been comical if the situation wasn't so painful. Mom looked like she wanted to yell, but Dad put a hand on her arm. "We understand, Alice," he said quietly. "We'll go. But I'll be here when you're ready. If you're ever ready." As the door closed behind them, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. I sank onto my couch, desperate for some peace to heal. Weeks passed. Life went on. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the mundane routine of everyday life. One day, while grabbing coffee, I spotted a familiar face, Sarah, my ex-stepmother. She was leaving a casino, phone pressed to her ear. "I know I owe you," I overheard her say, "but I'm sure I'll win it back this time. Just need a little more time." I ducked out of sight, a mix of pity and satisfaction washing over me. Her actions had cost her everything, yet she was still in denial. Tommy, my stepbrother, occasionally sent me text messages. Short, awkward exchanges that never went deep. He was in college now, trying to forge his own path. Like me, he seemed to be keeping his distance from the family drama. Months turned into a year. I met someone, Mark. Kind, funny, understanding Mark. As our relationship grew serious, he asked about my family. I told him everything. "Wow," he said, holding me close. "You've been through so much. Whatever you decide about your parents, I'm here for you." Now, as I sit here twirling the engagement ring on my finger, I'm faced with a decision I never thought I'd have to make. Our wedding is months away, and I still don't know if I want my parents there. Part of me wants to extend an olive branch, to see if we can build something new from the ashes of our old relationship. Another part is terrified of letting them back in, of making myself vulnerable again. I look at the save the date cards on my coffee table, 2 envelopes set aside, one for Mom, one for Dad. My pen hovers over them, indecision paralyzing me. In the end, I set the pen down. I'm not ready to make this decision yet, and that's okay. I've learned that healing takes time, and forgiveness can't be forced. Hey there, I'm Zoe. I've always been good at reading people. It's probably why I became a psychologist. I had my own private practice and spent most of my waking hours helping others sort out their problems. Ironic, right? Considering what happened later. Anyway, there I was, approaching my late 30s, when it hit me like a ton of bricks, I wanted a family. Crazy how that sneaks up on you. My best friend, Sarah, must have sensed my sudden desperation because she offered to set me up with her second cousin. "Come on, Zoe," she said over coffee one day. "He's a great guy. Smart, funny, and he's got a good job. What be you got to lose?" I sighed, stirring my latte absently. "I don't know, Sarah. Blind dates aren't really my thing." She rolled her eyes. "It's not a blind date if I show you his picture first. Besides, you two can chat online before meeting. It's perfect." That's how I found myself friend requesting Mark on social media later that evening. To my surprise, we hit it off right away. Mark was 38, just a year older than me, and he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. Our chats were easy, flowing from one topic to the next without any awkward pauses. We chatted for weeks before finally agreeing to meet in person. I was nervous as hell, palms sweating as I waited for him at the coffee shop we'd chosen for our first date. When Mark walked in, I felt my breath catch. He was tall, with kind eyes and a warm smile. He spotted me and waved, making his way over to my table. "Zoe?" he asked, extending his hand. I nodded, returning his smile. "That's me. It's nice to finally meet you in person, Mark." He sat down across from me, and just like that, the nerves melted away. We talked for hours, losing track of time until the barista politely informed us they were closing. As we walked out into the cool evening air, Mark turned to me. "I had a great time, Zoe. Would you like to do this again sometime?" I didn't hesitate. "I'd love to." And just like that, I found myself falling headfirst into a relationship with Mark. We started seeing each other regularly, going on dinner dates, walks in the park, and even a few weekend getaways. As our relationship progressed, I noticed something peculiar about Mark. His phone was constantly buzzing with messages. At first, I didn't think much of it. We all have busy lives, right? But the frequency was unusual, even for a popular guy. One night, as we lay in bed after a nice dinner, his phone lit up for what felt like the 100th time. I couldn't help myself. "Busy night, huh?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Mark glanced at his phone and smiled sheepishly. "Oh, it's just my mom. She likes to check in." I raised an eyebrow. "Your mom? At this hour?" He shrugged, looking a bit uncomfortable. "Yeah, we're pretty close. She raised me alone after my dad died when I was 5. I had pretty bad bronchial asthma as a kid. There were times she literally saved my life." I listened as Mark opened up about his childhood. The more he talked, the clearer the picture became. His mother wasn't just devoted, she was his entire world. "Sounds like you two have a special bond," I said, choosing my words carefully. Mark nodded enthusiastically. "We do. I owe her everything." As a psychologist, alarm bells were ringing in my head. The relationship Mark described sounded codependent, but I pushed those thoughts aside. I wasn't his therapist, I was his girlfriend. It wasn't my place to analyze their relationship. Weeks turned into months, and soon we'd been dating for nearly a year. Mark was sweet, attentive, and our relationship felt solid. But there was always this nagging feeling in the back of my mind about his relationship with his mother. One day, as we were having lunch at my place, Mark suddenly looked nervous. "Zoe," he began, fidgeting with his napkin. "I'd like you to meet my mom. I think you'll really like her. She's excited to meet you too." The next weekend, I found myself standing outside a modest 2-story house, my palms sweating. Mark squeezed my hand reassuringly as he rang the doorbell. The door swung open, revealing a petite woman with graying hair and Mark's kind eyes. She smiled warmly at us. "You must be Zoe," she said, pulling me into an unexpected hug. "I'm Helen. Come in, come in." As we settled in the living room, I couldn't help but notice how Helen's eyes never left Mark. She fussed over him, asking if he wanted a drink or a snack, completely ignoring my presence. I watched their interaction, feeling more like an observer than a participant. Helen dominated the conversation, constantly bringing up stories from Mark's childhood or fretting over his health. As we left a few hours later, I felt drained. Mark, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to the awkwardness. "So, what did you think?" he asked eagerly as we drove away. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "Your mom clearly loves you very much." Mark beamed. "She's great, isn't she? I knew you'd like her." I forced a smile, not having the heart to burst his bubble. But as we drove back to my place, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just witnessed something far more complex than a mother's love. 6 months flew by, and before I knew it, Mark was down on one knee, a sparkling ring in his hand. Despite my lingering concerns about his relationship with Helen, I said yes. I was in love, and I truly believed we could work through any issues together. We decided to move in together, into my apartment, of course. As we dove into wedding preparations, I quickly realized this wasn't going to be the fun, exciting experience I'd always imagined. Helen inserted herself into every decision, every detail. It wasn't just the wedding, either. Helen called constantly, always with some crisis that required Mark's immediate attention. One evening, as we were discussing flower arrangements, Mark's phone rang. He answered immediately, his face creasing with concern. "What's wrong, Mom? The sink's leaking? I'll be right there." He hung up and turned to me apologetically. "I've got to go help Mom. Her sink is leaking, and you know how she is with plumbers." This scene repeated itself almost daily. If it wasn't a leaky sink, it was a stubbed toe or a sad mood that only Mark could lift. And if he ever hesitated. "After all I've done for you," Helen's voice would crack over the speakerphone. "I just need a little help. Is that too much to ask?" I couldn't take it anymore. One night, after Mark returned from yet another Helen emergency, I decided to broach the subject. "Mark," I said gently, "I think it might be helpful if we saw a couples therapist. Someone who could help us navigate this situation with your mom. I think her demands are a bit excessive." "Excessive?" Mark's voice rose. "She raised me alone, Zoe. She saved my life multiple times. How can you call that excessive?" I backpedaled, realizing I'd hit a nerve. "I'm not saying she doesn't love you. I'm just worried about the impact on our relationship." Mark softened slightly. "Okay, maybe you're right, but can we do it after the wedding? We're so busy right now, and I don't want to add more stress." I knew I should push harder, insist on addressing this before we tied the knot. But I was exhausted from fighting this invisible battle with Helen. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. The weeks flew by in a whirlwind of cake tastings, dress fittings, and endless phone calls with Helen. Before I knew it, we were just days away from the wedding. Despite the stress, I was excited. My friends had planned a bachelorette party, and I was looking forward to a night of fun without wedding talk or Helen drama. We hit our favorite bar, laughing and dancing. For the first time in months, I felt light, free from the constant tension of planning a wedding under Helen's watchful eye. Then my phone rang. Mark's name flashed on the screen. "Zoe," his voice was tight with panic. "Mom's in the hospital. Her blood pressure spiked. I'm heading there now." I quickly explained the situation to my friends and called a taxi. The ride to the hospital felt endless, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. The moment Helen saw me, her face crumpled. "Oh," she moaned, dramatically covering her face with her hands. "It's you. My blood pressure, it's your fault. All this wedding stress." I froze, shocked by the accusation. "Helen, Helen peeked through her fingers, her eyes narrowing at me. "I can't handle this right now, my poor heart." Mark turned to me, his expression apologetic but firm. "Zoe, could you wait outside? Just for a bit?" Stunned, I nodded and walked out, collapsing into a chair in the hallway. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, nurses and doctors bustling past me. Finally, I stood up, determined to understand what was happening. I approached the nurse's station, using every ounce of my professional demeanor. "Excuse me," I said to the doctor charting nearby. "I'm Zoe, Helen Johnson's future daughter-in-law. Could you tell me about her condition?" The doctor looked up, his expression neutral. "Mrs. Johnson's blood pressure is elevated, but not dangerously so. We're monitoring her, but there's no immediate cause for concern." I took a deep breath, weighing my next words carefully. "Doctor, I'm a psychologist. And I'm concerned that Mrs. Johnson might be dealing with some psychological issues. Has anyone evaluated her mental health?" The doctor's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's an interesting observation. We haven't done a psychological evaluation, but given what you're saying, it might be worth looking into. I'll make a note to refer her for an assessment." I nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Thank you, doctor. I appreciate your help." Returning to my seat in the hallway, I waited a bit longer, hoping Mark would emerge. But as the minutes ticked by, I realized he wasn't coming out anytime soon. Defeated, I sent him a text, heading home. Call me when you can. I called another taxi and went back to our apartment. My phone buzzed with messages from my friends, asking where I'd disappeared to. I sent a quick apology, telling them to enjoy the rest of the night without me. It was past midnight when I heard the key in the lock. Mark shuffled in, looking exhausted. "Hey," he said softly, "you're still up." I sat up, trying to keep the hurt and anger out of my voice. "How's your mom?" He sighed, sinking into the armchair across from me. "She's okay. They're keeping her overnight for observation." I stayed until she fell asleep. She was so upset, Zoe. She kept asking me not to leave her alone. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Mark, do you really think that's all it is? Don't you see what's happening here?" He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Zoe, please, not tonight. Can we just go to bed? I'm exhausted." I wanted to argue, to make him see reason. But looking at his tired face, I knew it was pointless. So I nodded, swallowing my frustration. The big day finally arrived. Mark pulled me aside just before the ceremony and took a deep breath. "Look, I know things have been tense with Mom lately. But I've made some arrangements to keep her happy today. I just need you to go along with it, please?" My heart sank. "What kind of arrangements?" Mark explained quickly. Helen had a special menu prepared for her, citing non-existent allergies. She'd be seated next to Mark at the head table, not with the other parents. The DJ had a list of her favorite songs to play. And, Mark added hesitantly, she wants to make a speech. I closed my eyes, counting to 10 in my head. "Okay," I said finally. "For you, for us." He kissed me gratefully, and I returned to my bridesmaids, plastering on a smile. The ceremony itself was beautiful. As I walked down the aisle, seeing Mark's face light up, I felt a surge of love that pushed all my doubts aside. For a moment, it was just us. The reception was an experience. True to Mark's word, Helen held court at our table, regaling everyone with stories of Mark's childhood. She barely acknowledged my presence, except to occasionally pat my hand condescendingly. When it came time for speeches, I watched in horror as Helen tottered up to the microphone, wine glass in hand. "My dear friends and family," she began, her voice wavering. "We're here to celebrate my only son's wedding day." She went on for what felt like hours, talking about Mark's childhood, his accomplishments, and how she'd sacrificed everything for him. I was mentioned exactly once, as an afterthought. As she finally wrapped up, Helen raised her glass. "To my son, and his wife. May they be as happy as Mark and I have always been." I downed my champagne in one gulp. The rest of the night passed in a blur. We danced, we laughed, we cut the cake. And through it all, Helen hovered, always ready to interject herself into every moment. The wedding is over, but as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, nothing changed. Helen called every day, sometimes multiple times a day. There was always some crisis, some reason she needed Mark's immediate attention. One day, as he grabbed his keys, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Mark, we need to talk about this. It's not healthy, for any of us." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know, you're right. We should see someone. A therapist, like you suggested. Let's look into it this weekend." But when the weekend came, there was always some reason to postpone. Helen needed help with her grocery shopping. The lawn needed mowing. The cat needed to go to the vet. And so it went, week after week. Empty promises and endless excuses. 3 months into our marriage, I was at my wit's end. The constant intrusions from Helen, Mark's unwillingness to set boundaries, and the strain on our relationship were taking their toll. When my vacation time came around, I saw it as a golden opportunity. "Mark," I said one evening, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice, "let's go on a honeymoon. Just the two of us, away from everything. What do you say?" To my surprise and relief, Mark's face lit up. That sounds amazing, Zoe. Where do you want to go? We spent the next hour excitedly planning a tropical getaway. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful. This was our chance to reconnect, to remember why we fell in love in the first place. I'll take care of everything, Mark promised. The flights, the hotel, all of it. And when we get back, I promise we'll deal with the situation with Mom. Maybe look into that therapy we talked about. The day of our departure arrived, and I was practically bouncing with excitement as we drove to the airport. Mark seemed a bit distracted, but I chalked it up to pre-flight jitters. As we approached the check-in counter, Mark handed me my boarding pass. I glanced at it, then did a double take. Economy? I asked, confused. I thought we were flying together. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, about that. I had some credit card bonuses I could use, but there was only enough for one first-class ticket. I figured since I'm taller, it made sense for me to take it. It'll save us money overall. I stared at him, hurt and bewildered. But, it's our honeymoon. Couldn't we have both flown economy and sat together? Come on, Zoe, he said, a hint of irritation in his voice. Don't make a big deal out of this. It's just a few hours. Swallowing my disappointment, I tried one last time. Okay, well, can I at least come to the first-class lounge with you before the flight? We could pay extra. No, Mark cut me off quickly. The ticket's in my name. They won't let you in. Look, I've got to go check in. I'll see you on the other side, okay? Before I could respond, he was gone, wheeling his suitcase towards the first-class check-in. Feeling deflated, I made my way through security and to the regular boarding lounge. As I sat there, trying to salvage my excitement for the trip, a familiar figure caught my eye. There, just outside the first-class lounge, I saw a flash of graying hair and a floral dress that looked suspiciously like something Helen would wear. My heart started racing. Was I imagining things? Had the stress of the past few months finally made me paranoid? But Mark's strange behavior, his insistence on flying first class alone, his refusal to let me into the lounge, it all suddenly made a horrible kind of sense. Before I could talk myself out of it, I marched up to the first-class lounge desk. Excuse me, I said, pulling out my credit card. I'd like to purchase access to the lounge, please. The attendant looked skeptical, but processed my payment. As she handed me the access card, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I might find. I pushed open the door to the lounge, my eyes scanning the plush seats and buffet tables. And there, in a quiet corner by the window, sat Mark and Helen, heads close together over cups of coffee. They looked comfortable, like they were embarking on their own little adventure. I took a deep breath and strode towards Mark and Helen, my heels clicking loudly on the polished floor. They both looked up as I approached, and I saw the color drain from Mark's face. Zoe, he exclaimed, jumping to his feet. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, I replied, my voice ice cold. Care to explain why you're here with your mother instead of your wife? Mark glanced nervously around the lounge. Zoe, please, he said in a low voice. Let's not do this here. I can explain everything after we land, I promise. Before I could respond, Helen chimed in, her voice sickeningly sweet. Oh, Zoe dear, what a surprise. Mark and I are just about to take off for a lovely first-class trip together. Isn't that nice? But what are you doing in this lounge? Mark stepped between us, his face a mask of guilt and fear. Zoe, I'm sorry. The truth is, there were enough bonus points for 2 first-class tickets. I thought Mom deserved a nice trip, and what about me, Mark? I practically shouted, no longer caring about the scene we were causing. I'm your wife. We're supposed to be starting our life together, but instead, you're jetting off with Mommy dearest while I'm shoved in economy like an afterthought. The lounge had gone completely silent. Every eye was on us, but I was beyond caring. Do you have any idea what it's been like these past few months? I continued, years of frustration pouring out. The constant calls, the emergencies, the way you always put her first. And now this? How could you do this to me? Mark reached out to touch my arm, but I jerked away. Zoe, please, he pleaded. You need to calm down. We can work this out. Once we're on vacation, we'll have time to talk, to get closer. We can fix this, I promise. I stared at him, suddenly feeling very calm and very, very tired. Fix this? I repeated quietly. Mark, there's nothing left to fix. I'm going home and I'm filing for divorce. Mark's jaw dropped. Divorce? Zoe, you can't be serious. But Helen cut him off, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. She stood up and linked her arm through Mark's. Well, if that's how you feel, dear, I think it's for the best. Come along, Mark. We don't want to miss our flight. I watched in stunned silence as Helen led Mark away. He looked back at me once, his expression a mix of regret and relief, before they disappeared through the boarding gate. For a moment, I just stood there, feeling the weight of dozens of curious stares. Then, without a word, I turned on my heel and walked out of the lounge. As I made my way through the airport, my mind was oddly blank. I should have been crying, screaming, feeling something. But all I felt was a strange sense of liberation. I spent the next few hours gathering Mark's belongings. Clothes, books, the silly knickknacks his mother always bought him, I packed it all up methodically, my mind oddly calm. When I was done, I called a courier service and had everything sent to a nearby storage facility. The next day, I contacted a divorce lawyer. As I signed the preliminary paperwork, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. This was the right decision, I knew it in my bones. Instead of wallowing, I decided to use my vacation time for myself. I redecorated the apartment, erasing all traces of Mark. I reconnected with old friends, started yoga classes, and spent long hours reading books I'd been meaning to get to for years. A month passed, and my phone buzzed with a message from Mark. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Zoe, please, can we talk? I typed out a brief response. Storage facility number 247. Access code 8891. Your things are there. Divorce papers have been sent to your mother's address. Please sign and return them. Then I blocked his number. Returning to work was like a breath of fresh air. I threw myself into my practice with renewed energy. My experiences, painful as they were, had given me new insights into codependent relationships. I channeled this knowledge into a series of research papers, carefully anonymizing the details. To my surprise and delight, these papers caught the attention of the psychology department at the local college. They invited me to give a guest lecture, which turned into an offer for a part-time teaching position. It was at the college that I met James. He was a fellow professor in the psychology department, tall, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. We bonded over shared research interests and a mutual love of terrible puns. As the weeks passed, James and I grew closer. He was everything Mark wasn't: independent, respectful of boundaries, and wonderfully self-assured. He had a teenage daughter from a previous marriage, and watching him balance his role as a father with his career and our budding relationship was a revelation. One evening, as we were grading papers together, my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, my old friend who had originally set me up with Mark. Hey Zoe, it read. Thought you should know, Mark's still living with Helen. If anything, they seem even closer now. I'm so sorry for my part in all this. Hope you're doing okay. I stared at the message for a moment, then set my phone aside. James looked up, concern in his eyes. Everything all right? He asked. I smiled, realizing that for the first time in a long time, I truly was all right. Yeah, I said. Everything's fine. And it was. Mark and Helen's relationship was no longer my problem. I had my own life to live, my own path to follow. My name's Miranda, and this is my story. My parents, Jack and Linda Thompson, had it all: successful careers, a beautiful house in the suburbs, and a plan. A plan that involved having a son, their precious heir. Instead, they got me. I remember the day I realized I wasn't the child they'd hoped for. I was 5, playing with my dolls in the living room when I overheard my mom on the phone. "Yes, it's true. We're having a boy." Her voice was filled with an excitement I'd never heard before. "Oh, you have no idea how long we've waited for this. Finally, a son." Those words cut deep. I didn't fully understand then, but I felt it, the sting of being second best, unwanted. Things changed quickly after that. Mom's belly grew bigger, and so did the distance between us. Dad was always working, and when he was home, all the talk was about the baby boy on the way. One day, Mom called me into the kitchen. "Miranda, sweetie, we need to talk." I climbed onto a chair, my legs dangling. "What is it, Mommy?" She didn't look at me as she spoke. "You're going to stay with Grandma for a while. Isn't that exciting? Mommy and Daddy need to prepare for the baby. You'll have more fun with Grandma anyway." And just like that, I was packed off to Grandma's house. Grandma Rose was Dad's mom, a retired English literature professor. She lived in a cozy little house filled with books and the smell of freshly baked cookies. Living with Grandma was different. She actually paid attention to me, listened when I talked, and didn't seem bothered by my presence. We'd spend hours reading together, and she'd tell me stories about when she was a teacher. For the first time in my life, I felt loved, truly loved. 2 years flew by. I was 7 when Dad showed up at Grandma's doorstep. "It's time to come home, Miranda," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your brother needs you." Brother. The word felt foreign. As we drove home, Dad filled the silence with awkward small talk. "Your brother's name is Ethan, he's one now. You're a big sister now, Miranda. That's a big responsibility." I nodded, not really understanding what that meant. Little did I know, my childhood was about to end. We pulled into the driveway of our house. It looked the same, but it felt different. Mom was waiting at the door, a toddler on her hip. "Miranda, meet your brother, Ethan," she said, her voice oddly formal. I looked at the chubby-faced boy with curly blonde hair. He gurgled and reached out a pudgy hand towards me. "Hi, Ethan," I said softly. And just like that, at 7 years old, I became more than a sister. I became a caretaker, a responsibility, a built-in babysitter. My childhood slipped away, replaced by dirty diapers, constant vigilance, and the weight of expectations I was too young to bear. While my classmates were playing with dolls and learning to ride bikes, I was changing diapers and warming bottles. "Miranda, can you watch Ethan while I make a call?" Mom would say, not really asking. I'd nod, already reaching for my little brother. It wasn't that I didn't love Ethan, I did, fiercely. His toothless grin and grabby little hands had won me over from day one. But the constant responsibility was overwhelming. Days blurred together in a haze of school, chores, and babysitting. I was exhausted, struggling to keep up with my homework while making sure Ethan was safe and happy. But no matter how hard I tried, it never seemed to be enough. One fateful day, I took Ethan to the park. He was 2 now, full of energy and curiosity. I turned my back for just a second to tie my shoelace, and in that moment, disaster struck. "Miwanda!" Ethan's cry pierced the air, followed by a thud. I whirled around to see him sprawled on the ground, his knee bleeding. Panic seized me as I scooped him up, trying to soothe his wails. When we got home, Mom exploded. "How could you be so careless?" she shouted, cradling Ethan. "You're supposed to watch him." "I'm sorry, I just..." "No excuses," Dad chimed in, his face red with anger. "Go to your room. We'll discuss your punishment later." I fled upstairs, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't fair. I was doing my best, but I was just a kid myself. The incidents piled up. Ethan burning his tongue on hot porridge because I didn't blow on it enough. A bump on his head from a fall I couldn't prevent. Each time, the punishments got harsher, the disappointment in my parents' eyes more evident. Through it all, Grandma Rose was my lifeline. She'd visit when she could, her presence a balm to my battered spirit. During one visit, I overheard her confronting my parents in the kitchen. "This is unacceptable," Grandma's usually gentle voice was sharp. "Miranda is a child, not a nanny. Your favoritism towards Ethan is hurting her." "Mother, please," Dad sighed. "These are our children. We know what's best for them." "Do you?" Grandma challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, you're neglecting one child in favor of the other." "That's enough," Mom cut in. "We appreciate your concern, but this is our family. We'll raise our children as we see fit." I threw myself into my studies. School became my sanctuary, a place where I could shine on my own merits. And shine I did, my grades a silent rebellion against the notion that I wasn't good enough. The years flew by, and before I knew it, I was standing at a crossroads. High school was behind me, and college loomed ahead. Despite the constant struggle at home, I'd managed to excel in my studies. It was my ticket out, my chance at freedom. When the acceptance letter arrived, I could hardly believe my eyes. Not only had I been accepted to study investment management, but I'd also received a full scholarship. My hands shook as I read the words over and over again. "Mom, Dad," I called out, racing down the stairs. "I got in. Full scholarship." "Oh, thank goodness," Mom sighed, relief evident in her voice. "That saves us a fortune. We need to start saving for Ethan's college fund." My heart sank. Of course. It wasn't about my achievement. It was about the money they wouldn't have to spend on me. The first few months were a whirlwind of classes, new friends, and the exhilarating taste of freedom. The money from my parents, combined with the small amounts Grandma Rose secretly sent, was just enough to scrape by. I was careful with every penny, knowing how precious this lifeline was. But 6 months into my college journey, everything changed again. My phone rang one evening as I was studying for a finance exam. "Miranda," Mom's voice came through, curt and businesslike. "We won't be sending you any more money. Ethan needs tutors if he's going to have any chance at college. We need to focus our resources on him now." I felt the familiar sting of rejection, of being cast aside. "But Mom, I can barely." "You're an adult now, Miranda," she cut me off. "You need to solve your own problems. We can't keep supporting you forever." The next few weeks were a blur of stress and sleepless nights. I scoured job boards, applied to every position I could find. Finally, I landed a part-time gig at a nearby cafe. The hours were long, the pay was meager, but it was something. Balancing work and studies was brutal. I'd rush from classes to shifts, then stay up late into the night studying. Dark circles became a permanent fixture under my eyes, and my grades started to slip. One particularly rough day, I called Grandma Rose, desperate for a friendly voice. "Miranda, sweetheart, you sound exhausted," she said, concern evident in her voice. The dam broke. Through tears, I told her everything, the cut-off allowance, the grueling work hours, the struggle to keep up with my studies. "Those absolute," Grandma cut herself off, taking a deep breath. "Listen to me, Miranda, you focus on your studies. I'm increasing your monthly allowance. And don't you dare argue with me about it." "But Grandma." "No buts," she said firmly. "You deserve this education, and you shouldn't have to kill yourself working to get it. Your parents, well, let's just say, I'll be having words with them." True to her word, Grandma's support allowed me to cut back my work hours. I could breathe again, focus on my classes. My grades improved, and for the first time in months, I felt hope. The years at college flew by in a blur of textbooks, exams, and late-night study sessions. Before I knew it, I was standing on the stage, diploma in hand, magna cum laude gleaming on the certificate. As I scanned the audience, I spotted Grandma Rose, beaming with pride. My parents and Ethan were noticeably absent. With my degree in hand, doors opened. I landed a job at Stonebridge Investments, a prestigious firm in the city. The salary was more money than I'd ever seen, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly independent. To save money, I moved in with Sarah, a coworker who became a fast friend. Our tiny apartment was a far cry from the dorms, but it was ours, and it felt like freedom. When my first paycheck arrived, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. I scoured every second-hand bookstore in the city until I found it, a rare first edition of Grandma's favorite author. The following weekend, I took a train to my hometown, gift in hand. Grandma's face lit up when she saw me at her door. "Miranda, what a wonderful surprise." I presented her with the wrapped book, watching as tears welled in her eyes when she opened it. "Oh, my dear girl," she whispered, hugging me tight. "You shouldn't have." "I wanted to," I said simply. "You've done so much for me, Grandma." As we chatted over tea, I mentioned visiting my parents. Grandma's face tightened slightly, but she nodded. "I'm sure they'd love to see you." But when I called, Mom's voice was distant. "Oh, this weekend? We're quite busy, Miranda. Perhaps another time." The rejection stung, but I pushed it aside. I spent the weekend with Grandma instead, relishing her warmth and genuine interest in my life. As I boarded the train back to the city on Sunday, I couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and relief. Time marched on. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye, and my career soared. My bosses praised my work ethic and insight, and the bonuses started rolling in. Soon, I was able to afford my own apartment, a small, sun-filled space that was all mine. One evening, as I was settling in for a quiet night, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. "Miranda," she said without preamble. "These teachers, they just don't understand Ethan. They're giving him such poor grades. He barely scraped into City College." I bit my lip, choosing my words carefully. "Mom, maybe college isn't the right path for everyone. There are great vocational courses Ethan could." "Don't be stupid," she snapped. "Your brother is brilliant. Much smarter than you, actually. He's just misunderstood. He'll show everyone, you'll see." As I hung up, I gazed around my apartment, the tangible proof of my success. Yet somehow, I still felt like that little girl, desperately seeking approval. Life has a funny way of appending expectations. While I was building my career, brick by careful brick, Ethan's college experience was crumbling around him. It was a crisp autumn day when Mom called again, her voice tight with frustration. "Ethan's been expelled," she said without preamble. "He's coming home." She launched into a tirade about unfair professors and a system designed to fail students like Ethan. I listened, biting my tongue against the urge to point out the thousands they'd spent on his education, the loans they'd taken out to rent him a luxury apartment, the generous allowance they'd provided. All things I'd never had. "We'll figure something out," Mom concluded. "Ethan just needs time to find his path." I thought about Ethan, now 21, returning to our childhood home, while I, at 27, was forging ahead in my career. The contrast was stark, but I pushed the thought aside. Comparison is the thief of joy, after all. Life, however, had other plans for me. It was at a company event that I met Jack, tall, kind-eyed, with a quick wit that made me laugh like I hadn't in years. Our whirlwind romance swept me off my feet, and before I knew it, we were standing in a small chapel, exchanging vows in front of a handful of loved ones. Grandma Rose was there, of course, beaming with pride. My parents attended too, though their smiles seemed a bit forced. Ethan didn't come, citing a vague prior commitment. Jack and I moved into his apartment, a cozy space that quickly became home. His parents, Tom and Ellen, welcomed me with open arms, their warmth a balm to my soul. A year into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. The joy that filled me was indescribable. When we announced it to our families, Jack's parents were ecstatic. My parents' reaction was more subdued. "Do you know what it is yet?" Mom asked immediately. I shook my head. "It's too early to tell." As the months passed, their interest in the baby's gender became almost obsessive. When we finally revealed it was a boy, their relief was palpable. "A grandson," Dad exclaimed. That's wonderful news, Miranda. I tried not to read too much into their reaction, focusing instead on preparing for our son's arrival. Little Alexander came into the world on a rainy Tuesday, his tiny hand wrapping around my finger as if to say, "I'm here, Mom. I've got you." As I held him, I vowed to give him all the love and support I'd craved as a child. While I was navigating new motherhood, Ethan continued to drift. He picked up odd jobs here and there, but nothing stuck. He was still living at home, much to our parents' poorly concealed frustration. During a rare family dinner, I tried to broach the subject gently. "You know, Ethan, there's an entry-level position opening up at my company. I could put in a good word." "Miranda," Mom cut me off sharply. "Your brother doesn't need your charity. He's just taking his time to find the right opportunity." Dad nodded in agreement. "You were lucky, Miranda. Things just fell into place for you. Not everyone has it so easy." I blinked, stunned. Lucky? The sleepless nights studying, the years of juggling work and school, the constant struggle to prove my worth, none of that felt like luck. But I swallowed my retort, not wanting to start an argument. As I looked around the table, at my parents' defensive postures, Ethan's sullen expression, and little Alexander babbling happily in his high chair, I realized something profound. Family isn't just about blood. It's about support, understanding, and unconditional love. And sometimes, the family you choose can fill the gaps left by the one you're born into. As Alexander's 5th birthday approached, we planned a trip to my hometown, Jack, our son, and me. Our first stop was Grandma Rose's house. We spent a wonderful afternoon with her, Alexander captivated by her stories and the old photos she showed him. As we were leaving, Grandma pulled me aside. "Your parents have been struggling," she said softly. Maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones?" The next day, we stood on my parents' doorstep. Mom answered, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Dad was in his armchair, Ethan slouched on the couch. They both looked up as we entered. After awkward greetings and stilted small talk, Mom cleared her throat. "Miranda, we need to talk to you about something." What followed was a halting explanation of their financial troubles. Medical bills, Ethan's ongoing unemployment, the lingering college debt, it had all piled up. "We hate to ask," Dad said, not meeting my eyes, "but we could use some help." I glanced at Jack, who gave me a subtle nod. Despite everything, these were my parents. Of course, I heard myself say. "I can send some money each month." The relief on their faces was palpable. We worked out the details, $1,500 a month, with the understanding that they could reach out if emergencies arose. Over the next 2 years, I faithfully sent the money each month. There were occasional requests for extra help, a broken water heater, unexpected car repairs, which I always obliged. It felt good to be able to help, to maybe finally earn their approval. When Thanksgiving rolled around, we found ourselves back in my childhood home. The house was full, aunts, uncles, cousins, and Grandma Rose all crowded around the dining table. As we ate, Mom and Dad couldn't stop talking about Ethan. "He's been at his new job for 3 months now," Mom beamed. "Such a hard worker." Dad chimed in, "Did you see the new sofa cushions? Ethan bought those with his first paycheck." So thoughtful of him. I glanced around the room, noting the new curtains, the fresh paint on the walls, the updated appliances in the kitchen. All purchased with the money I'd been sending. But I bit my tongue, not wanting to spoil the mood. Jack squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. Alexander, oblivious to the undercurrents, happily chatted with his cousins. The Thanksgiving dinner continued, the chatter of family filling the air. I was just starting to relax when Alexander tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, can I go play in the other room?" he asked, his eyes bright with the restlessness of a 5-year-old at a grown-up gathering. I nodded, ruffling his hair. "Sure, sweetie. Just don't make too much noise, okay?" As Alexander scampered off, I turned back to the conversation. Barely a minute had passed when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, confusion furrowing my brow. The caller ID read, Mom. I looked up at my mother, sitting directly across from me at the table. Mom, why are you calling me? She frowned, shaking her head. I'm not calling you, dear. My phone's in the living room. Just then, Alexander reappeared in the doorway, my mother's phone clutched in his small hands. The room fell quiet as all eyes turned to him. Mommy, he said, his voice ringing in the sudden silence. I found Grandma's phone and I wanted to see who she talks to. I saw a funny name, Cash Cow, and clicked on it to see who it would call. Why did it call you, Mommy? What's a cash cow? The words hit me like a physical blow. Cash cow. Is that all I was to them? I looked around the table. My relatives sat frozen, forks halfway to their mouths. Grandma Rose's face was a mask of shock and anger. And my parents, they had gone deathly pale. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until something inside me snapped. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Cash cow, I repeated, my voice trembling. Is that what I am to you? My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. My father couldn't even meet my eyes. Let me tell you all something, I continued, addressing the whole table. For the past 2 years, I've been sending my parents $1,500 every month. When they've asked for extra, I've sent that too. All those new things you've been admiring? The curtains, the appliances, the fresh paint? That was all bought with my money. I could feel tears pricking at my eyes, but I blinked them back. I did this despite years of being treated like I was second best. Despite being sent away as a child, despite having to work my way through college while Ethan got everything handed to him. I did it because I thought maybe, finally, you'd see me. You'd be proud of me. My voice cracked on the last words. But instead, I'm just your cash cow. A resource to be milked dry. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Jack stood up and put his arm around me, a solid presence at my side. Alexander, not fully understanding but sensing the tension, came and wrapped his arms around my legs. The silence in the room was deafening. I stood there, heart pounding, waiting for my parents to say something, anything. An apology, an explanation, even a denial. But what came next shocked me to my core. My mother's face hardened, her eyes flashing with indignation. Well, of course you help us. We gave birth to you, raised you, it's your duty. Don't be so sensitive about a silly phone contact. I felt as if I'd been slapped. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt bubbled to the surface. Duty? Is that what you think this is? Well, let me make this clear, from this day forward, I'm done. No more money, no more help. I'm cutting ties. At the mention of losing financial support, Mom's demeanor changed instantly. Tears sprang to her eyes. How can you be so heartless? After everything we've done for you. She looked around the table, seeking support from our relatives. But to her surprise, and mine, they remained silent. One by one, they looked away from her pleading gaze. Then Grandma Rose spoke up, her voice quivering with anger. Heartless? You dare call Miranda heartless after how you've treated her? Well, let me tell you something, I want nothing more to do with you either. And you can forget about any inheritance. It's all going to Miranda and Alexander. The room erupted into chaos. Mom was sobbing, Dad was trying to calm her down, and Ethan just sat there, looking bewildered. In the midst of it all, I felt Jack's hand on my shoulder, grounding me. I think it's time we left, he said softly. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. We gathered Alexander and our things, said goodbye to Grandma Rose and the other relatives, and walked out without another word to my parents. True to my word, I stopped all financial support. The call started almost immediately, first pleading, then angry, then downright abusive. When the messages turned into threats, I warned them that I'd take legal action if they didn't stop. Eventually, the calls and messages trickled to a stop. Life went on. I focused on my career, on Jack, on raising Alexander. Grandma Rose became an even bigger part of our lives, her love and support a balm to the wound left by my parents' betrayal. Years passed. Through the grapevine, I heard that Ethan had racked up significant debts. My parents, in a last-ditch effort to bail him out, had to sell their house. The three of them ended up in a small apartment across town. When I heard the news, I was surprised to find that I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, not even anger anymore. They had made their choices, just as I had made mine. Today, as I watch Alexander play in our backyard, Jack by my side, and Grandma Rose laughing from her favorite chair on the patio, I realize something profound. I've finally found my place, my worth. And no one can take that away from me.
My name is Kate, and I grew up in a small house that always smelled of fresh bread. Dad inherited the family bakery from his parents, and I loved helping him knead dough after school. Mom was different. She was a realtor, always dressed in sharp suits and heels, bringing in more money than Dad ever did. "Kate, come set the table," Mom called one evening. I was 12, gangly and awkward, more interested in reading than anything else. "Coming!" I shouted back, dog-earing my page. As I laid out the plates, I heard them start up again. "Another slow month, John." Mom's voice dripped with disdain. "When are you going to get your act together?" Dad's reply was soft. "Sarah, please, not in front of Kate." "Oh, who cares?" Mom snapped. "She should know what a loser her father is." I gripped the edge of the table, willing myself not to cry. This was a common scene in our house. Mom belittling Dad, Dad trying to keep the peace. I knew Mom was angry about more than just money. She felt trapped in a life she never wanted. "Kate," Mom barked, "where's my wine?" I scrambled to pour her a glass, my hands shaking. As I set it down, some splashed onto the tablecloth. Mom's eyes flashed. "You useless girl! Can't you do anything right?" Dad intervened. "It's just a little wine, Sarah. No harm done." Mom glared at him. "You're too soft on her. No wonder she's growing up to be just as pathetic as you." I fled to my room, burying my face in my pillow. I loved Dad fiercely, but I couldn't understand why he put up with Mom's treatment. As for me, I'd learned to make myself scarce, to be as quiet and unobtrusive as possible. The next morning, I woke to find the house eerily silent. No smell of baking bread, no click of Mom's heels. I crept downstairs to find Dad sitting at the kitchen table, his face ashen. "Where's Mom?" I asked, though I already knew the answer deep in my gut. Dad wordlessly handed me a note. In Mom's elegant handwriting, it read, "John, I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving with Richard. He can give me the life I deserve, not this small-town nonsense. Kate, don't bother trying to find me. You're just dead weight I don't need. John, you're a loser, and you've turned our daughter into one too. Goodbye and good riddance." I stared at the paper, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Mom was gone. She'd abandoned us, calling Dad a loser and me useless in her parting shot. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. Dad filed for divorce and petitioned to have Mom's parental rights terminated. I remember sitting in the cold courthouse, my sweaty hand clutching Dad's as we waited for Mom to show up. She never did. I zoned out as the adults talked, catching snippets like abandonment and unfit parent. When it was over, Dad squeezed my hand. "It's done, Katie," he said softly. "The divorce is final and your mother's parental rights have been terminated. It's just you and me now." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Life got harder after that. Dad threw himself into work, spending long hours at the bakery. Despite being only 12, I took on most of the housework. I'd come home from school, do my homework, then start on dinner and laundry. 3 years passed in this routine. Then, just after my 15th birthday, everything changed again. Dad came home one day, his face a mix of shock and grief. "Uncle Pete died," he said, collapsing into a kitchen chair. "Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry," I said, hugging him tight. He hugged me back, then pulled away, his eyes wide. "Katie, you won't believe this. He left me everything. Almost $300,000. I'm his only living relative. I don't know what to do with it all." But Dad figured it out quick. He invested a chunk of the money into the bakery, upgrading equipment and expanding the menu. Within months, our little bakery was the talk of the town. Dad hired more staff, extended the hours, and before we knew it, he was opening a second location across town. By the time I turned 16, Dad owned 3 thriving bakeries. Our financial worries were a thing of the past. I quit my after-school job and focused on my studies. We even took our first real vacation, a 2-week trip to Europe. As the years went by, Mom became a distant memory. Dad dated occasionally, but never seemed interested in remarrying. I didn't push it. We were happy as we were. High school graduation came and went in a blur of cap tossing and teary hugs. I'd worked my butt off and it paid off. I was headed to State University to study finance. The morning I was set to leave, Dad handed me a small box. "What's this?" I asked, opening it to find a key. Dad grinned. "Your graduation gift. It's an apartment near campus. No more worrying about dorm life or rent." I stared at him, speechless. "Dad, I can't. This is too much." He waved off my protests. "You earned it, Katie. Now go make me proud." College flew by. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make the most of the opportunity Dad had given me. When I wasn't in class or studying, I was interning at local financial firms. By the time I graduated, I had a job lined up as a junior financial analyst. My first day at work, I stood in front of my apartment mirror, straightening my laser. "You've got this, Kate," I told my reflection. "Make Dad proud." The job was challenging, but I loved it. Every bonus or raise I got, I invested rather than spent. Dad's voice echoed in my head. "Money makes money, Katie. Be smart with it." Years passed. By the time I hit 32, those smart investments had paid off. I owned 2 more apartments in addition to the one I lived in, all bringing in steady rental income. Life was good. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Katie," Dad's voice sounded strained. "Can you come over? I need to talk to you about something." I found him sitting at his kitchen table, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "What is it, Dad?" I asked, fear clenching my stomach. He took a deep breath. "It's cancer, honey. Stage 4 pancreatic." The world tilted on its axis. "No," I whispered. "There must be some mistake." But there wasn't. The next year was a hellish roller coaster of treatments, remissions, and relapses. I spent every free moment at the hospital or at Dad's house, making his favorite cheese soup, even when he was too nauseous to eat it. One crisp autumn day, I arrived at Dad's house to find him sitting in his favorite armchair, a serious look on his face. "We need to talk, Katie," he said, patting the seat next to him. "The doctors gave me 6 months tops." "No," I said, shaking my head furiously. "They're wrong. We'll get a second opinion. Well—" "Katie," he interrupted gently. "It's okay. I've made my peace with it. I'm selling the bakeries. Everything's going to you. You'll be set for life." I pulled back, wiping my eyes. "I don't want your money, Dad. I want you." He smiled sadly. "I know, sweetheart, but this is how I can take care of you even when I'm gone." The next 7 months were precious and painful. We talked more than we ever had about everything and nothing. I memorized every line on his face, the sound of his laugh, the smell of sugar and flour that clung to him even now. And then, on a quiet Wednesday morning, he was gone. The funeral was a blur. Afterward, I sat in Dad's empty house, clutching his favorite apron. The lawyer had already been by with the paperwork. True to his word, Dad had left me everything. I used the money from the bakeries to buy 2 more apartments. It felt right, somehow, building something lasting, just like Dad had done. A year after Dad's passing, I was just starting to find my footing again. Work kept me busy, and managing my rental properties gave me a sense of purpose. I'd settled into a new normal, or so I thought. Then came the call that turned everything upside down. "Kate, it's your mother. I'm back in town. I'd like to see you if you're willing." My mind raced. Part of me wanted to hang up, to protect myself from the woman who'd abandoned me. But another part, the part that still held on to the little girl I once was, couldn't help but be curious. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Let's meet at Rosie's Cafe tomorrow at noon." The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, my stomach in knots. As the clock struck 12, I saw her walk in. She looked older, of course, but still elegant. But she wasn't alone. A young girl, maybe 17, trailed behind her. Mom spotted me and hurried over. "Kate, darling, you look wonderful. And this is Lily, your sister?" I felt like I'd been slapped. My what? We sat down, and Mom launched into her story, how her lover, Richard, had left her shortly after Lily was born, how they'd struggled to make ends meet, how she'd decided to come back to her hometown to start over. "I heard you have a rental property," she continued, her voice hopeful. "I was wondering if maybe—" She trailed off, but her meaning was clear. I looked at Lily, who was staring at her hands, clearly uncomfortable. I thought about Dad, about how he'd always taught me to be kind, even when it was hard. I thought about the scared little girl I used to be, wishing for her mom to come back. "Okay," I heard myself say. "I have a unit that's just become available. You can stay there." Mom's face lit up. "Okay, thank you. We'll pay rent, of course." I held up a hand. "No rent, just utilities, for now." As we hammered out the details, I watched Lily. She looked so young, so out of place. I remembered being her age, feeling lost and alone after Mom left. "So, Lily," I said, trying to sound friendly, "you're what, a junior in high school?" She nodded, meeting my eyes for the first time. "Yeah, it's weird, starting at a new school for senior year." I felt a pang of sympathy, I bet. "Listen, if you need help with anything, school stuff, or just someone to talk to, I'm here, okay?" Lily gave me a small smile. "Thanks, that means a lot." As we left the cafe, Mom hugged me again. "You're an angel, Kate. I know I have a lot to make up for, but I hope we can start fresh." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to get a lot more complicated. But for better or worse, my mother was back in my life, and I had a sister. Only time would tell what that would mean for all of us. The months following Mom and Lily's return were strange. Mom quickly found work as a realtor, slipping back into her old life as if she'd never left. Lily enrolled in the local high school for her senior year. I kept my distance, unsure how to navigate this new family dynamic. Occasionally, Mom would call or stop by. "Kate, darling, thank you again for the apartment," she'd gush, her smile wide and seemingly sincere. "You've been such a blessing." I'd nod, uncomfortable with her effusive gratitude. "It's fine, Mom. I'm glad I could help." Lily and I developed a cautious friendship. I'd help her with math homework or listen to her college plans. It was nice in a way, having a sister, but there was always a barrier, the weight of the years we'd missed. Then came Lily's graduation. I attended the ceremony, watching from the back as she accepted her diploma. Mom beamed with pride, and for a moment I allowed myself to imagine what life might have been like if she'd never left. The very next day, Mom showed up at my door unannounced. Her face was flushed, eyes blazing. "We need to talk," she snapped, pushing past me into the living room. I followed, confused. "What's going on?" She whirled on me. "Don't play dumb. I know about the apartments, Kate. All 4 of them." My stomach dropped. How had she found out? What about them? I asked, keeping my voice level. You've been holding out on us, she shrieked, living the high life while Lily and I scraped by. I felt my temper rising. Excuse me, you're living rent-free in one of those apartments. That's not enough, she spat. Half of those properties should be mine. I'm your mother. I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was so absurd. You can't be serious. You lost any claim to my property when you abandoned us. Remember? No parental rights, no child support. She changed tack then, her voice suddenly pleading. Kate, sweetie, think about Lily. She needs money for college. If you just sold one apartment. Absolutely not, I cut her off. Lily's education is not my responsibility. How can you be so selfish? Mom wailed. After everything I've done for you. That was the last straw. Everything you've done for me? I repeated incredulously. You mean abandoning me? Calling me useless in your goodbye note? Or wait, do you mean living rent-free in my apartment for months? Mom recoiled as if I'd slapped her. For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then, without another word, she turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, shaking with anger and hurt. How dare she? After everything, how dare she try to guilt me like this? I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. I'd known, deep down, that letting Mom back into my life was a risk. But I'd hoped. Well, I wasn't sure what I'd hoped for. As the adrenaline faded, I felt a deep, aching sadness. This woman who should have been my protector, my support, was nothing but a stranger who wanted to use me. And Lily. God! What was I going to do about Lily? 2 weeks after Mom's blow-up, I was grabbing coffee at my usual spot when I noticed the barista giving me odd looks. As I waited for my order, I overheard a snippet of conversation from a nearby table. Can you believe it? Charging her own mother rent when she's got all those apartments? I froze. Surely they couldn't be talking about me? But they were. Over the next few days, I caught more whispers, more sidelong glances. It seemed Mom had been busy spreading her twisted version of events to anyone who would listen. Then came the Facebook post. I saw it during my lunch break and nearly choked on my sandwich. My daughter Kate has 4 apartments she rents out, making a fortune but refuses to help pay for her sister's college education. She's forcing me to pay exorbitant rent when I can barely make ends meet. I'm heartbroken that my own child could be so greedy and selfish. The comments poured in, each one a knife to my heart. How could she do that to her own mother? What a horrible person. I always knew there was something off about her. Friends, relatives, even old classmates I hadn't spoken to in years, all of them jumping on the bandwagon, shaming me for my supposed greed. Not one of them seemed to remember or care that this woman had abandoned me as a child. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my boss called me into his office. Kate, he said, his face grave, we need to talk about this situation with your mother. It's starting to affect the company's reputation. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sir, I can explain. He held up a hand. I'm not asking for details, but I need you to resolve this quietly and quickly. We can't have this kind of drama associated with our firm. Understand? I nodded numbly, not trusting myself to speak. Back at my desk, I found an email notification about unpaid utilities for Mom's apartment. Great, just great. With shaking hands, I dialed Mom's number. What do you want? She snapped by way of greeting. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom, there are unpaid utility bills for your apartment. We agreed you'd cover those, remember? She scoffed. Oh, please! You're rolling in money from all those apartments? You can afford to pay a few bills. That's not the point, I said, my patience wearing thin. We had an agreement. An agreement? She interrupted. Like the agreement that you'd help your family? Fat lot of good that did us. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling like the world was crumbling around me. How had I let things get this far? I'd tried to do the right thing, to be kind and generous, and this was how I was repaid. With a heavy heart, I made an appointment with a lawyer. "Ms. Stevens," the lawyer said, "reviewing my case, you have every right to evict your mother. She has no lease, pays no rent, and you've given her ample notice about the utility bills." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. "What do I need to do?" He handed me a document. "This is an official eviction notice. Serve it to her, and if she doesn't comply, we can take legal action." Armed with the paper, I drove to Mom's apartment. My apartment, really. My hands shook as I knocked on the door. Mom answered, her face twisting with displeasure when she saw me. "Oh, it's you. Have you finally come to your senses about selling an apartment for Lily's college?" Lily's picked out her school. Tuition's due next month. My shock turned to anger. "Are you serious right now? After everything you've done, you're still making demands?" "Don't be so dramatic," Mom scoffed. "It's the least you can do for family." That was it. The last straw. I thrust the eviction notice at her. "Here, you have 30 days to vacate the premises." Mom stared at the paper, her face going pale. Then, without warning, she exploded. "You ungrateful little brute!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the apartment. "After everything I've done for you!" I stood my ground. "Everything you've done? You mean abandoning me? Spreading lies about me?" She lunged forward, her hand raised. I flinched, but the blow never came. Instead, she grabbed the front of my shirt, spitting insults in my face. "You're nothing. You hear me? Nothing but a selfish, heartless." I managed to break free, fumbling for my phone. "That's it. I'm calling the police." Mom's eyes widened, but she didn't back down. She continued her tirade, her words becoming more vicious with each passing second. When the police arrived, I was shaking, tears streaming down my face. I showed them the eviction notice, explained the situation as calmly as I could. "Ma'am," one officer said to Mom, "I suggest you calm down and discuss this civilly with your daughter." Mom sneered. "Civilly? With her? She's trying to throw us out on the street." The other officer turned to me. "Ms. Stevens, legally, this is a civil matter. We can't forcibly remove her without a court order. I'd suggest trying to work this out between yourselves or taking it to court if necessary." I nodded, feeling defeated. As the police left, Mom's triumphant smirk made my blood boil. "You won't do it," she taunted. "You don't have the guts to take your own mother to court." I stared at her, this woman who had given birth to me, but had never truly been a mother. In that moment, I felt something inside me harden. "Watch me," I said, my voice low and steady. Before she could respond, I turned and walked away. As I reached my car, I heard the slam of the apartment door behind me. As I drove home, I thought about what lay ahead. A court battle, more drama, more pain, but also, maybe, a chance to finally break free from the toxic hold my mother had over me. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt like I might throw up. As I walked into the courtroom, I saw Mom and Lily sitting on the opposite side. Mom's eyes were red and puffy, while Lily looked like she wanted to disappear. The proceedings began, and Mom put on quite a show. She wept dramatically, her voice breaking as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor," she sobbed, "my daughter has become so cold-hearted. She's trying to throw her own mother and sister out on the streets after everything I've done for her." I clenched my fists, willing myself to stay calm. Then my lawyer stood up, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady and confident, "I'd like to present some evidence that paints a very different picture of this situation." He proceeded to lay out the facts: Mom's abandonment when I was 12, the termination of her parental rights, her failure to pay any child support. He showed the judge the documentation of the rent-free arrangement and the unpaid utility bills. But he wasn't done. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Stevens is not, in fact, in the dire financial straits she claims. Mom's head snapped up, her eyes wide. My lawyer continued, Mrs. Stevens owns an apartment in another city, left to her by her former partner. She currently rents out this property for a substantial monthly income. The courtroom fell silent. The judge turned to Mom, his expression stern. Is this true, Mrs. Stevens? Mom's face had gone pale. She opened and closed her mouth a few times before finally whispering, Yes, Your Honor. The judge's voice was cold as he delivered his verdict. This court grants the eviction. Furthermore, Mrs. Stevens will pay back rent for the month she occupied the apartment rent, free. Mrs. Stevens, your actions are nothing short of unconscionable. This case is closed. The gavel came down with a bang that seemed to echo through my entire body. It was over. We'd won. As we left the courtroom, I caught sight of Lily. She looked lost, confused, and my heart ached for her. This wasn't her fault. I walked over to her, ignoring Mom's glare. Lily, I said softly, I'm sorry it came to this. If you need help, real help, you can still reach out to me, okay? She nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Kate, I didn't know. I gave her a sad smile and walked away, feeling like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. In the weeks that followed, Mom and Lily moved out of my apartment. I heard, through the grapevine, that they'd gone to live in Mom's other property. I didn't try to contact them, and they didn't reach out to me. As I stood in the now empty apartment, memories of the past few months flashed through my mind. The hope I'd felt when Mom came back, the pain of her betrayal, the stress of the court case, but underneath it all, I felt free.
I remember those days like they were yesterday. Mom, Dad, and me, Megan, the perfect little family. We weren't rich or famous, just ordinary folks living our best life. Dad worked as an accountant, always buried in numbers, but he'd light up when he got home. Mom was a teacher, spreading knowledge and kindness wherever she went. We'd spend weekends exploring the country, piling into our beat-up station wagon and hitting the road. Dad would blast his favorite oldies, and Mom would sing along, terribly off-key but not caring one bit. I'd sit in the back, rolling my eyes but secretly loving every minute of it. Those road trips were the best. We'd stop at dingy diners, ordering greasy burgers and sharing a giant milkshake. Mom would always steal my fries, claiming, I'm just testing them for poison, sweetie. When we weren't traveling, we'd hit up the local mall. I'd drag them from store to store, trying on ridiculous outfits and begging for the latest toys. Mom was the voice of reason, but Dad was a softie. He'd slip me a few extra bucks when Mom wasn't looking, whispering, our little secret, Meggie. Friday nights were pizza nights. We'd order in, sprawl out on the living room floor, and watch cheesy movies. Dad would try to explain the plots, Mom would shush him, and I'd stuff my face with pepperoni, not caring about anything but the moment. I was 11 when Mom started feeling tired all the time. At first, we didn't think much of it. Teaching is exhausting after all. But then came the doctor visits, the worried whispers, the hushed phone calls. I didn't understand what was happening. Nobody told me anything, but I could feel the change in the air. The laughter became less frequent, the road trips stopped, and pizza nights were replaced with quiet, tense dinners. One night, I overheard Dad on the phone, his voice cracking as he spoke. The treatments aren't working, Mike. I don't know what we're going to do. That's when I knew. Something was very wrong with Mom, and our perfect little world was about to shatter. I wish I could go back to those happy days, freeze time, and stay in that bubble of blissful ignorance forever. But life doesn't work that way. The storm was coming, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. For now, I close my eyes and try to remember the good times. The smell of Mom's perfume, the sound of Dad's laughter, the taste of Friday night pizza. Those memories are all I have left of the life I once knew, the life I desperately wish I could return to. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because it was pizza night, but there was no pizza, no laughter, no mom. Just silence and the horrible beeping of hospital machines. "Megan, sweetie," Dad said, his voice cracking. "Mom, she's gone." Just like that, my world collapsed. Mom, my rock, my best friend, was gone. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I just stood there, numb, as Dad hugged me, his tears soaking my hair. The next few weeks were a blur of black clothes, hushed voices, and casseroles I couldn't bring myself to eat. I kept expecting Mom to walk through the door, to tell me it was all a bad dream. But she never did. Then, about 6 months after we lost Mom, something changed. Dad started going out more. I thought he was getting better, until I saw her. She was tall, blonde, and nothing like Mom. Her name was Karen, and she had a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Megan, this is Karen," Dad said, looking nervous. "We've been seeing each other." I couldn't believe it. Mom wasn't even cold in her grave, and he was already replacing her. Karen bent down, her face inches from mine. "Hi, Megan. I've heard so much about you." When Dad wasn't looking, Karen's smile dropped. Her eyes turned cold, calculating. In that moment I knew. This woman was trouble. Over the next few weeks, Karen was everywhere. She'd come over for dinner, watch TV with us, even try to help me with homework. But the moment Dad's back was turned, the mask would slip. "Listen, kid," she hissed one day when we were alone. "I'm here to stay. Don't get any ideas about messing this up for me." I tried to tell Dad, I really did, but he just shook his head. "Megan, I know this is hard for you, but Karen's a good person. You're just jealous. Maybe we should get you to talk to someone." Jealous? I couldn't believe it. My own father thought I was making this up. Before I knew it, I was sitting in a therapist's office, being told I had adjustment issues and difficulty with change. Karen had somehow convinced everyone, Dad, our relatives, even the neighbors, that I was troubled. Poor Megan, I'd overhear her saying on the phone. "She's having such a hard time. There are mental problems. We're getting her the help she needs." Then came the bombshell. A year and a half after Mom died, Dad dropped the news. "Megan, Karen and I, we're getting married. We thought it'd be best if you spent the summer at camp. Give you some time to adjust." But I knew the truth. They were shipping me off so I wouldn't ruin their perfect day with my sour face, as Karen put it. I left for camp with a heavy heart, knowing that when I returned, everything would be different. My home wouldn't be mine anymore. My family was changing, and there was nothing I could do about it. I returned from camp with a knot in my stomach. The house looked the same from the outside, but as soon as I stepped through the door, I knew everything had changed. "Welcome home," Megan, Karen said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "We need to talk about room arrangements. With the baby coming, we'll need to make some changes." My head spun. "Baby? What baby?" Dad's face lit up. "That's right, you don't know. Karen's pregnant. You're going to be a big sister." Karen led me upstairs, chattering about nursery colors and baby names. We stopped at my room, or what used to be my room. "We've started converting this into the nursery," Karen said, pushing open the door. My heart sank. My posters were gone, replaced by pastel wallpaper. My desk had vanished, a crib standing in its place. "Where's my stuff?" I managed to choke out. Karen waved dismissively. "Oh, we moved you to the guest room. It's cozier anyway." The guest room was barely bigger than a closet. My things were piled haphazardly on the bed, some boxes still sealed. "This is temporary, right?" I asked, looking at Dad. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Well, Meggie, with the new baby." I got the message. I was being pushed out, replaced. The next few months were a blur of doctor's appointments, baby showers, and me trying to make myself as small as possible. Karen's belly grew, and with it, her control over our lives. Then, one crisp fall morning, my little brother was born. Despite everything, when I held him for the first time, I felt a surge of love. For a moment I thought maybe things would get better. But Karen had other plans. "Careful, Megan," she'd say, snatching him away. "You might drop him. Or he's sleeping now. Maybe you can see him later." There was always an excuse, always a reason why I couldn't spend time with my brother. Dad was too busy with work and the new baby to notice. Years passed. I threw myself into school, counting down the days until I could leave for college. My brother grew into a sweet, curious kid, but Karen made sure our interactions were limited. Finally, my senior year arrived. One night I overheard Karen and Dad arguing. "She needs to learn responsibility," Karen insisted. "A job right out of high school would do her good." Dad's voice was firm. "No, Sarah wanted her to go to college. We set aside money for it. Megan's going." I'd never been so grateful for my dad standing up for me. When my acceptance letter came, I cried with relief. I was getting out. I was going to start my own life, away from Karen's manipulations. On move-in day, Dad helped me pack the car. Karen and my brother stayed home. "I'm proud of you," Meggie, Dad said, hugging me goodbye. "Your mom would be too." As I drove away, watching my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror, I felt a mix of sadness and hope. I was leaving behind the only home I'd known, and the little brother I never really got to know. But I was also driving towards freedom, towards a future where I could be myself without Karen's shadow looming over me. College was like a breath of fresh air after years of suffocation. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make something of myself. Advertising became my passion, a world where creativity met strategy, and I could finally express myself freely. But even as I reveled in my newfound independence, there was always a nagging ache in my heart. My little brother, barely 6 when I left, was growing up without me. During rare visits home, I'd catch glimpses of the amazing kid he was becoming. "Megan, look what I drew," he'd exclaim, showing me his latest masterpiece. I'd ruffle his hair, cherishing these brief moments. "It's awesome, buddy, you're quite the artist." Karen would inevitably interrupt, whisking him away for some urgent task or another. The distance between us grew with each passing year. Graduation day arrived, a bittersweet triumph. As I stood in my cap and gown scanning the crowd, I realized Dad and Karen weren't there. Later, a terse text arrived: "Congratulations on graduating. Dad, Karen." It stung, but I refused to let it dampen my spirits. I had a future to build. Thanks to my internships and portfolio, I landed a job at a hip advertising agency in the city. Grandma Mom's mom and my guardian angel helped me secure a tiny but cozy apartment. "Your mother would be so proud," she said, pressing a check into my hand. "This is for rent. She always wanted you to have a good start." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work was challenging but rewarding. I made friends, went on dates, and slowly began to heal from the wounds of my past. For 3 years I lived in relative peace, with only occasional, awkward holiday visits to break the calm. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. "Megan, it's Dad. I have some news. We've sold the house and bought a new place, bigger, more modern. I was hoping. Well, would you help us move? It might be a good chance for us to reconnect." I was speechless. After years of distance, this sudden olive branch felt surreal. "Karen would be happy to see you too," he added, though I doubted that. "And your brother? Megan, he's 12 now. He asks about you all the time." I closed my eyes, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to refuse, to protect myself from more hurt. But another part, the part that still missed my family, that longed for reconciliation, won out. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll come." Great Dad's relief was palpable. "I'll text you the address. See you this weekend." As I packed a bag for the weekend, my emotions swirled. Hope mingled with anxiety, excitement with dread. Whatever happened, this visit would change everything. I just didn't know if it would be for better or worse. I pulled up to the address, my jaw dropping at the sight. The house was enormous, all sleek lines and modern architecture. It looked nothing like the cozy home I grew up in. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Dad opened it, a hesitant smile on his face. "Meggie, you made it." "Hi, Dad," I said, stepping inside. Karen appeared behind him, her smile as plastic as ever. "Megan, how nice of you to come," she said, her tone suggesting anything but. I looked around, expecting to see my brother. "Where's—" "Oh, he's staying with my parents for the weekend," Karen cut in smoothly. "We thought it would be easier to move without him underfoot." The look in her eyes told me everything. This was deliberate. She'd made sure my brother wouldn't be here, denying me even this small chance to reconnect with him. Swallowing my disappointment and anger, I forced a smile. "So where do you want me to start?" For the next few hours, I threw myself into the work. I scrubbed floors, arranged furniture, and hung curtains. It was easier than trying to make conversation with Dad or enduring Karen's false pleasantries. As I was sorting through some boxes in what would be the study, I came across a pile of framed photos. My heart stopped as I recognized one particular frame. It was a portrait of Mom, the one that used to hang in my childhood bedroom. Her smile beamed at me from beneath a layer of dust. Clutching the photo, I walked into the living room where Dad and Karen were discussing paint colors. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "why is Mom's picture in a pile of junk?" Dad's face fell, a mix of guilt and sadness crossing his features. He opened his mouth to speak, but Karen beat him to it. "Oh, that old thing," she said dismissively. "We decided those photos don't really fit with the new decor. They're a bit superfluous, don't you think?" Superfluous. The word hit me like a slap. My mother's memory, reduced to an outdated decoration. "Superfluous," I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "This is my mother, your wife," I added, looking at Dad. Dad at least had the decency to look ashamed. "Megan, we didn't mean." But I was already moving, gathering up every photo of Mom I could find. I found her old jewelry box, a few of her books. Without a word, I carried them out to my car, ignoring Karen's protests and Dad's weak attempts to explain. As I placed the last item in my trunk, I felt a storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Anger at Karen's callousness, disappointment in Dad's spinelessness, and a deep, aching sadness for the mother I'd lost and the family that seemed beyond repair. I slammed the trunk shut, the sound echoing in the quiet street. For a moment, I considered getting in the car and driving away, leaving this mess behind once and for all. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of Mom, her voice in my head telling me to be strong. Maybe it was the thought of my little brother who I still hadn't seen. Or maybe it was just sheer stubbornness, refusing to let Karen win. Whatever it was, I found myself walking back into the house. Karen was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding to avoid confrontation. Dad stood in the hallway looking lost, so I went back to cleaning, trying not to think about Dad's betrayal. As I was about to leave, Dad caught my arm. "Megan, wait. There's something else." I turned, eyebrow raised. "What now?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We're having a housewarming party in a few days. We would really appreciate your help." Before I could respond, Karen swooped in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh yes, Megan, we could really use your assistance. Perhaps you could handle the catering? I'll take care of the cleaning, invitations, and overall organization." I opened my mouth to refuse, but Dad jumped in. "Please, Meggie, all our relatives and friends will be there. We can't manage without you." His pleading eyes wore me down. Despite everything, a small part of me still wanted to make him happy. "Fine," I sighed. "I'll help with the food, I'll even pay for it myself." Karen's smile widened. "Wonderful. We're thinking of an Italian theme. You know, to christen the new kitchen." I nodded, an idea forming. "Actually, I know the best Italian restaurant. I'll order from there. Quality guaranteed." Oh, Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. "What's the name of this restaurant?" "Bella Notte," replied, watching her carefully. She nodded, looking satisfied. "Sounds perfect. We'll leave it in your capable hands then." As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Karen's sudden agreeableness was suspicious, but I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. Over the next few days, I threw myself into planning the perfect menu. I called my friend Maria, owner of Bella Not. "Megan. It's been too long," she answered cheerfully. "Hey Maria, I need a favor. My dad's having a housewarming party, and I'm in charge of food. Think you can help me out?" "For you? Anything. What are you thinking?" We spent an hour crafting the perfect Italian spread. Antipasti platters, handmade pastas, tiramisu for dessert, the works. I spared no expense, wanting to prove I could handle this responsibility. After finalizing the order, I felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Despite everything, a small part of me hoped this party might be a turning point. Maybe, just maybe, we could start to heal our fractured family. The next week dragged by slowly. I kept myself busy with work, but my mind often wandered to the upcoming party. I checked and double-checked the order, making sure everything was perfect. The day before the housewarming party, my phone rang. It was Maria from Bella Not. "Hey Megan, I'm a bit confused. Your stepmother called yesterday and asked to move the food delivery to today. Did the party date change?" My heart sank. "What? No, it's supposed to be tomorrow." Oh, Maria sounded worried. "Well, I wanted to double-check with you before making any changes." I thanked her, my mind racing. After hanging up, I immediately called Karen, my suspicions on high alert. "Hi Karen, just wanted to confirm the party details for tomorrow," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Oh yes, everything's set for tomorrow at 7 p.m, she replied smoothly. "We're looking forward to it." I thanked her and ended the call, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. It was clear now Karen had tried to change the delivery date behind my back. She wanted me to miss the party entirely. Taking a deep breath, I called Maria back. "Hey, it's me again. I need to cancel the order," I said, my voice tight. "Cancel? But Megan, are you sure? It's a lot of food and it's all paid for." "I know. Keep the payment, consider it a gift. Use the food for the restaurant if you can." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. The betrayal stung, but a part of me wasn't surprised. This was classic Karen, always finding new ways to push me out. The same evening, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my social media and saw my cousin was live streaming from the party. There it was, the housewarming in full swing, happening right now, a day early. I watched, a mix of hurt and anger building inside me, as Karen showed off the new house. She preened for the camera, pointing out design features and accepting compliments from guests. Suddenly a voice off camera asked, "Where's Megan? I thought she'd be here." Karen's face changed, a look of false concern replacing her smile. "Oh, you know Megan, she's always been a bit unsociable. Some mental health issues, poor dear. She said she couldn't make it." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Mental health issues? Unsociable? The lies flowed so easily from her lips. Karen quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation back to the house. "Now, who's ready for some amazing Italian food? It should be here any minute." The guests cheered, and Karen beamed at the camera. Half an hour passed, and I could see the guests starting to look restless. Karen's smile became strained as she kept assuring everyone the food would arrive any minute now. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the live stream. Karen's perfectly crafted facade was crumbling before my eyes. Her smile had become a grimace as she dialed the restaurant's number, the speakerphone amplifying every word for the gathered guests. "Hello, Bella Not. This is Karen. Where is our food order?" The response was clear and devastating. "I'm sorry, Mom, but that order was cancelled earlier today by Megan. There won't be any delivery." Karen's face contorted with rage. "What? That little John," she shrieked, turning to my father. "Call Megan right now." Dad, looking flustered, pulled out his phone. I watched, heart pounding, as he dialed my number. When I answered, his voice boomed through the speakerphone. "Megan, how could you cancel the food order? You've ruined everything." Taking a deep breath, I replied calmly, "Dad, why did you change the date of the housewarming? Why wasn't I invited?" The room fell silent. Dad's face paled as he stammered, we, Karen said. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Guests exchanged meaningful glances, eyeing Karen and Dad with suspicion. Suddenly, Karen snatched the phone from Dad's hand. "You ungrateful brat," she screeched. "After everything we've done for you, you're trying to sabotage us, aren't you?" I let her rant for a moment before speaking, my voice steady and clear. "I think everyone can see now who really has mental health issues in this family. And it's not me." Karen's hysterical shouting filled the room, but I could see the damage was done. Guests were backing away, some already heading for the door. "I'm done being your scapegoat, Karen," I said firmly. "And Dad, I'm done watching you choose her over your own daughter. Goodbye." I ended the call and closed the live stream, my hands shaking but my resolve strong. It was over. The lies, the manipulation, all of it laid bare for everyone to see. In the days that followed, I ignored the barrage of calls and messages from Dad and other family members. I needed time to process, to heal. A week later, Dad showed up at my apartment. He looked haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. "Megan, I'm so sorry," he began. "I've been blind. I let Karen control everything, and I lost sight of what really matters. Please, give me a chance to make things right." I wanted to slam the door in his face, but something in his expression stopped me. "It's not that simple, Dad. You abandoned me. You forgot about me." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "But I want to change. I promise I'll do better. Please, Meggie." Slowly, cautiously, we began to rebuild our relationship. Dad started calling regularly, and we met for coffee every week. He even brought my little brother along sometimes, away from Karen's watchful eye. As for Karen, I heard through the grapevine that she'd become something of a pariah among the family. Her lies exposed, she retreated into a shell of bitterness. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. I threw myself into my career, climbing the ranks at the advertising agency. My creativity flourished, fueled by the emotional turmoil I'd endured. I don't know what the future holds for my family. The wounds are deep, and healing takes time. But for the first time in years, I feel hopeful. I'm living life on my terms, pursuing my passions, and slowly, carefully, allowing love back into my heart. As I look out at the city lights from my apartment window, I can almost hear Mom's voice. "You're stronger than you know, Meggie," she used to say. And you know what? She was right.